Well, you're very welcome.
You come in with 21st. Training. Good morning, everyone. I'm bringing to order today's meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board here in Bristol, Virginia for the workshop meeting. We have a number of items to cover this morning before we actually get to the agenda. So just a few things for those of you in the audience and for board members. We are going to run today until noon. We're going to break for lunch, and then we're going to do some tours of projects and of various things in the district. We will reconvene tomorrow, with which I am a high degree of confidence will continue to be the workshop meeting at 8:30. I suspect, the commissioner is going to give another update on pavements and bridges, so I expect we will kind of run probably until about 11, at which point we will start with public comment for the action meeting. I do want to note that is a difference from what our past practice has been. We did post that and did alert individuals who indicated they were planning to come for public comment kind of that change in practice. And so I expect that's when we'll do public comment and start the action meeting there. Before we get to some of the introductions and videos from the district and some of the mayor folks, there's some new faces around the table, but I also just want to start by recognizing and thanking all of the former members who were with us last month but are not with us this month for their service. We really do appreciate everyone who's willing to take time and make the commitment to serve on this board. It's a volunteer board, as you all know, and you all do put in a lot of time and effort, and I just want to say thank you to all of those former members, and I do think we'll be doing some things for them at the September meeting when we're back in Richmond, kind of a more central location there. But I do want to go around and have the new members of the board introduce themselves for the benefit of both the public and their peers here on the board, and I think we'll start with Mr. Morrison.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Delaney Morrison. I live in Middleburg, Virginia, where I was born and raised. After graduating from the University of Virginia, I spent some time in Washington and then back in Charlottesville before moving back to the countryside to continue my finance business and to start a horse boarding and training facility. And over the last 16 years, I've been very involved in local advocacy, and today serve on 6 nonprofit boards related to land conservation and historic preservation. And I'm honored to be here and to serve with you all, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson?
Good morning. I'm honored to be an urban member of the CTB. I've been on the opposite side where I worked for VDOT. As a former VDOT employee, I began my career as Chief of Civil Rights before transitioning to Chief of Administration. During my tenure, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel was a thought. They were working on it, but it was a thought. The big project was I-495 and 395. My work centered on supporting small and women-owned business. And in that, that was my passion, because small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority small business are the backbone of our economy. Later, as Deputy Secretary of Transportation, I worked closely with the Department of Rail, Public Transportation, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Aviation, the Port of Virginia, and the Virginia Spaceport. I had to write that down to remember. This experience reinforced that every sector of our transportation system is necessary to advance the Commonwealth. We cannot rely solely on new construction. We must utilize all modes of transportation to move people and goods efficiently while supporting a thriving economy. Having previously implemented CTP policies, I now will be eager to join the board to help shape the policies. So I'm excited. Thank you, guys, and I'm looking forward to working with all of my colleagues. I got a good group I'm working with.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Next, we'll go to Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlie Payne, and I am from the Fredericksburg District, and I'm very honored to be here. My family has been in the Fredericksburg area since early 1700s. We've accumulated quite a bit of traffic since then, and so it's very exciting to be on this board. I'm also a partner with the law firm Herschler. We're headquartered in Richmond. We have 3 offices, Richmond and Tyson's in the Fredericksburg office, and I am the managing partner of the Fredericksburg office, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Mr. Moy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Moy. I am a Senior Vice President and Senior Counsel with the American Bankers Association. I live in Mineral. I am quite excited to join the board, join my colleagues, and support the Secretary and the Governor and their vision for transportation. I actually commute to DC 3 days a week, so this is a very personal thing to me. I have, I think, quite a bit of experience as it relates to transportation, so very excited to join.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moy. Ms. Radcliffe?
Good morning. My name is Marianne Radcliffe. I have a government relations firm with offices in Richmond and Norfolk called Kemper Consulting. I've been doing that well over 20 years at this point, but I began my life in the Secretary of Transportation's office and have really loved working with the CTB ever since then. Probably my very first entree into transportation was working on the passage of the Public-Private Transportation Act, and I've really worked in that space ever since. So much like Mrs. Johnson, a lot of time on 495, 395, the express lanes, Route 58, the Thimble Shoals Tunnel. So lots of really exciting projects. I too do the commute between Richmond and Norfolk, so I also have a lot of experience with the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel pleasures. I'm, as everyone's going to have to hear before I'm done this, my daughter's getting married next year in Hampton and getting a reception in Norfolk, so I'm very excited about the progress of that project.
No pressure, Commissioner.
No pressure, no. I've told him to get the boat ready, right? But anyway, I'm very excited to be here. This has always been a group that I've admired, so it's a little frightening to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much, new members of the board. I'm sure, we've talked before that you'll all be active participants, as I've conveyed to the members who have been with us for 6 months. We expect you all to engage in this process. Your input is what makes this whole process work. And so, my duty to you is to be transparent, provide you the information. What I ask for in exchange is that you engage with local communities and come to the board meetings ready to provide feedback based on what you've heard from those that you represent so that we can shape the policies here for the Commonwealth. So again, thank you for making the commitment to serve for 4 years. Your peers will tell you, again, you're gonna get lots of calls, you're gonna get lots of engagement, but that's all part of the process and it's a good thing. So again, thank you for coming today. So with that, we're gonna transition into the workshop meeting. I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Folks here, who I believe wants to recognize some local officials as we then get into the local transportation updates. Mr. Folks?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and fellow members of the CTB. I'm glad to welcome you as the Bristol District representative of the board. I've had the privilege of serving in this capacity since the fall of 2021. I was a little bit disappointed to learn that some of my colleagues were able to catch a plane out here to Bristol. I wished that for them they would have the same privilege that I do of traveling up and down Interstate 81, Interstate 64, Interstate 66, and know that it's a long way from Hampton Roads to Bristol. It's a long way from Northern Virginia to Bristol and Winchester to Bristol. And for you who've not been in this part of the state before, understand that you can still go west 100 miles and be in the Commonwealth. So you're just in the middle of Southwest Virginia, not at the far end. So the Bristol District comprises 12 counties in the far southwest and 2 independent cities, Norton and here in the city of Bristol. And we have a fabulous staff at the Bristol District. Our VDOT do a marvelous job under sometimes very difficult conditions, and particularly in the winter with snow and sleet and rain and hail and those conditions. And so we'll welcome you. We've got, I think, a fun afternoon in store for you, going to Damascus and Taylor's Valley and Abingdon then for drinks and dinner. Now it's my privilege to introduce the mayor of the city of Bristol, Jake Holmes. And so Jake is going to make some remarks and tell us a little bit about the city. And after him, Tabitha Crowder, our Bristol district engineer, will do a presentation. And what you see before you on the board is indicative of what we're going to see. Mayor Holmes, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Thank you for having me this morning. Thank you, Mr. Folks. It's great to be with you all. Excited to have you all here in the city. I'm honored to welcome you all here. As Mr. Folks said, the drive to Bristol is long, but also I've been to Richmond quite a bit, so that drive that way is long as well. So made it quite a bit. So I appreciate the work you all do for the Commonwealth as a local elected official and as a recovering legislative staffer in the General Assembly. I appreciate the work you all do. It's vitally important for the Commonwealth. The impact you all have, most folks don't understand, but it's very important for the citizens of the Commonwealth. So thank you for what you do. I hope while you're in Bristol, you get to experience what we have to offer. I hope if you came in last night, you've been downtown a little bit. It's just one street over on State Street. We share our main street, which is State Street, with Tennessee. Hope you've experienced that a little bit. Hope you've taken the obligatory photo on the state line. But if you're going to spend money, if you're going to shop, eat, I hope you pull your foot back over to the Virginia side and spend that money here. The sign at the end of the street says it's a good place to live. I hope you get to experience that. I hope you get to have a little fun. And I hope you come back. I hope you get to come back, bring your family, get to have some more time down here. So I do want to say, the local VDOT team, as has been mentioned, is fantastic. At the local level, we get to work with them routinely. They do a fantastic job. They've been great partners with our city. And I will say, as a local elected official for a small city that doesn't pay the bills for me, I also have a full-time job with Appalachian Power, and so I've gotten to work with the local VDOT team in that capacity as well. They're fantastic there as well. So you've got a really fantastic team with Ms. Crowder and her folks. I just want to say, Southwest Virginia is taken care of here, so they do a great job. However, I will say, as you're making decisions in this process, I hope you think of Bristol as you go through this. Also, my colleague from Dickinson County is here as well, Mr. Hall. Think of Dickinson County as well. So shout out, Chris. Got to look out for my friends here. So as you spend your next couple days here in Bristol, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a great time. But also, I hope you feel welcomed while you're here. If you need anything, please reach out. We want to be hospitable to you all. Hope you have a great time. And if you need anything, please yell. Thank you all.
Morning, Secretary, Commissioner, Director, members of the CTB. As Mr. Folks said, I'm Tabitha Crowder. I'm the Bristol District Engineer. And going after the two of them, they already talked about how Bristol's in Virginia and Tennessee. Mr. Folks said you can go 100 miles and still be in Virginia. I'm going to say you can drive 2 hours west and still be in Virginia in the tip of Lee County in the Cumberland Gap. That area of the state is closer to 9 other state capitals and sits farther west than Detroit. Here in Bristol, we're closer to 7 other state capitals, so that kind of feeds into your driving a long way, right, to other parts of the state. Our communication staff has prepared a video to provide a brief description of the district, and I'll have a few additional remarks after the video.
Thank you.
Roads are sometimes taken for granted for their practical and simple nature, but roads are crucial to daily life and commerce. Roads are what connect us. In the VDOT Bristol District, our team connects communities across the far southwestern corner of the Commonwealth, and we do so with a talented, capable, and professional workforce. The district spans 5,500 square miles, serving 12 counties, the cities of Bristol and Norton, and more than 327,000 residents. The district maintains 7,400 miles of roads in the southwest corner of Virginia, from Interstate 77 in Wythe and Bland counties to the Cumberland Gap, where Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia meet. With the second largest inventory in the state, the Bristol district maintains over 3,300 bridges and culverts. Predominantly mountainous, this region is shaped by some of the most scenic terrain in Virginia. Technology and innovation continue to grow here, supported by companies such as CGI, Sykes, Enterprises, Crutchfield, and Wrap Technologies Manufacturing and Distribution Hub. New investments, including the Bristol Casino, Amazon and FedEx distribution centers, and Earthlink's support center, strengthen the region's economy and create new jobs. Coal mining has a long history in Virginia and remains an important industry in Southwest Virginia. The majority of coal mined in Southwest Virginia is metallurgical, or met coal, and most is exported and used in steel production. In recent years, the production of natural gas from coal beds and coal mines has become a significant contributor to regional economic growth. The Bristol District is also a crossroads of cultural and musical heritage. The Crooked Road Music Trail celebrates the musical traditions born in this region, as does the Birthplace of Country Music Museum in downtown Bristol. In Abingdon, the historic Barter Theater serves as Virginia's state theater, producing world-class plays in the heart of Appalachia. Across the region, quaint downtowns create gathering places. History, and the arts, highlighting local hospitality and inviting visitors to stay. Critical interstate corridors, Interstate 81 and Interstate 77, carry travelers, goods, and economic energy to and through the region. Unique features along I-77 in Bland County include two mountain tunnels, East River Mountain Tunnel opened to traffic in 1972, and Big Walker Mountain Tunnel opened to traffic in 1974. East River Mountain Tunnel is split between the states of Virginia and West Virginia, with Virginia responsible for the day-to-day operations of the tunnel. Primary corridors in Southwest Virginia include routes 460, 19, 23, 58, and 11, forming the backbone of movement through communities. The Bristol District is home to noteworthy transportation projects, including the Piedmont Avenue Bridge Project, a significant bridge rehabilitation project in the heart of downtown Bristol that is home year-round to gray bats, a species that's been federally endangered since 1976. Multiple roundabout projects to improve safety and efficiency for motorists, and Corridor Q Route 460 in Buchanan County, which overlaps with a portion of the Route 121 Coalfields Expressway. Corridor Q covers almost 129 miles from Pikeville, Kentucky to Christiansburg, Virginia. 2 miles of new Corridor Q construction remain in Virginia, construction of Poplar Creek Phase B near Grundy. Widening of Interstate 81 southbound between exits 10 and 7 in Bristol wrapped up in May 2026 and included the widening of 1 mile of northbound I-81 at one of the busiest areas along I-81 in the Bristol District. The project is part of the Interstate 81 Corridor Improvement Program, which has delivered 24 projects in the district since the program's inception. Multiple flood events in the past several years, as well as Hurricane Helene in 2024, have shown the resiliency of the Bristol District. From replacing bridges to rebuilding roads, the team worked tirelessly following each weather event to ensure safe access. Following Hurricane Helene, the district also completed the rebuilding of Route 58 in Washington County, 5 months ahead of schedule. In addition to the district's dedication to planning, delivering, operating, maintaining, and serving the motorists of Virginia, the staff is also focused on community outreach. VDOT Bristol has a large presence at the Endless Opportunities Facility in Abingdon, a workforce exploration center for K-12 students to learn about and connect with local employers like VDOT. We welcome you to a district defined by its traditions, its landscapes, its people, and the roads that connect them. Welcome to the VDOT Bristol District.
So in the video, you saw our Corridor Q project, which is part of the Appalachian Development Highway System.
Roads are are sometimes taken for granted for their practical and simple nature, but roads are crucial to daily life and commerce. Roads are what connect us.
In the state at 225
In the
feet.
VDOT Bristol District,
It has
our
the
team
tallest
connects
cuts at
communities
400
across the
feet,
far
the
southwestern
deepest
corner of the
spills
Commonwealth,
300 feet,
and we do so
the
with a
deepest,
talented,
longest
capable,
precast
and
culvert
professional
at
workforce.
310 feet
The
deep,
district spans
and
5,500 square
2,250
miles,
linear
serving
feet
12
long.
counties, the cities
Total
of
earth
Bristol and
move will be
Norton, and
65
more than
million cubic yards,
327,000
and this
residents.
is all among
The district maintains
the
7,400
thriving
miles
elk
of
herd
roads in the
made
southwest
its
corner
home
of
there
Virginia,
over 250
from Interstate
years.
77 in width and Blanchard.
Again, welcome to the Bristol District, and we hope you enjoy your stay in Southwest Virginia. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Crowder. All right, with that, folks, we're going to go to agenda item number 2, and Mr. Hutchinson, I believe you are up, and I do just want to note we are asking something that I've told you we will try not to do, except in rare circumstances. This is a rare circumstance, so we are briefing you on something today that we are asking for your action on tomorrow. I want to just say we seek to do this as rarely as possible. The changes here are relatively minor, but most importantly, they are required by law. And so we are asking for no changes beyond those from which the General Assembly has told us we will in fact use. They have also said that we cannot provide any grants from this program until we take the act to update the guidelines. So those two factors are the only reason that this is coming before you with a briefing today with a request for action tomorrow. I understand if you still have concerns, and I welcome to hear those, but again, just wanted to let you know why we have kind of what I consider something I told you we were going to try not to do, that we are doing. So, Mr. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good morning, members. Right. As the Secretary mentioned, the General Assembly recently directed the administration and the Commonwealth Transportation Board to update the notification requirements for this program. That was a requirement that was adopted in the state budget just before the end of this past month. So this is an overview. I'll briefly go through some of the background, the purpose behind the creation of the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, the method and recent capitalizations of that fund and how it's capitalized, some examples of some of the recent awards that have been made, and then we'll briefly go over the previous notification requirements and slight adjustment to the notification requirements as directed by the budget. So TPOF, the Transportation Partnership Opportunity Fund, was created in 2005 with the goal of providing funds to address the transportation aspects of an economic development project. That can include, roads to a facility, for example. It's the classic example, but there's many other ways that obviously transportation interacts with an economic development project. It was initially capitalized from the toll facility revolving account, and it has subsequently been recapitalized by the General Assembly through the Commonwealth Transportation Funds, not through general funds. As you see here, the fund currently receives 1/3 of all interest, dividends, and appreciation that accrues to the Transportation Trust Fund and the Highway Maintenance and Operating Fund, as well as interest earnings on the Commonwealth Transportation, interest earnings on the TPOF fund itself. The grants are approved by a couple of different methods. Monies can be provided from the fund by the governor as grants of up to $5 million or revolving loans of up to $30 million. And the governor can direct the Commonwealth Transportation Board to provide funds of any amount and other loans through a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. The budget previously required certain notifications to the General Assembly when the governor moves forward with one of these grants. As we mentioned, the state budget slightly revises those notification requirements to the General Assembly. Guidelines and criteria for grants and loans were developed in consultation with the Secretary of Commerce and Trade, because Commerce and Trade, of course, plays a key role in recommending particular projects through the administration. So briefly, Section 33.2-1529-1C2 of the budget previously required that funds directed in excess of $5 million. The Secretary of Transportation has to submit a report to the Chair of Senate Finance and Appropriations in the Senate and House Appropriations in the House within 30 days of those funds being directed. Funds in excess of $35 million on any one project are actually subject to review by the Major Employment and Investment Project Approval Commission, which is comprised of members of the administration and the General Assembly. And that MEI approval has to happen within 14 days, or action, I should say, by MEI has to happen within 14 days. If MEI did not act within 14 days, the funds can be directed as proposed by the administration. The budget last year in 2025 directed that funds in excess of $20 million for any one project or a cumulative direction of $50 million during a biennium also has to be subject to review by the MEI Commission within 20 days, or absent any MEI action, the funds may be directed as proposed. Another previous, the new requirements of the budget that changed these notifications require that funds directed in excess of $10 million for any one project and any cumulative direction of $25 million, so lowered the threshold there to 25, during a biennium has to be subject to review by MEI within 30 days. If MEI does not act, the funds may be directed as proposed. And the notification change itself is that the administration has to hand deliver this notice to the staff of the MEI Commission, as well as House Appropriations and Senate Finance Appropriations staff, to obviously cut down on any sort of miscommunication. That's just, we'll hand deliver it to them. And the guidelines have to be updated in order to make any future awards, as the Secretary mentioned.
So members of the board, this is the change, okay? So if you think about it this way, the authority of this board and of the administration to allocate funds is the same. What has changed is the amount of time that we must provide an opportunity to review of awards of a certain amount. That amount has been lowered. The number of people we must provide the notice to has been expanded, and the method of delivery has been changed. I think it's fair to say that something happened at some point that caused some concern with certain members of the General Assembly, and in response, they have said, again, they didn't change the code. They put this in the budget. They said, we want to see different behavior. And I guess we will see at the end of this biennium whether or not they believe the behavior has changed and this requires modification of code, or whether this continues in the budget. But nonetheless, I think it is safe to say at some point since the conclusion of the 2025 General Assembly session and prior to the start of the 2026 General Assembly session, some things happened that caused concerns. And so as a result, we now have these additional provisions here. We have no concerns with complying with these from the administration's standpoint. The TPOF fund, as Mr. Hutchinson noted, is an important fund that we have available to support economic development projects. He'll hit a few of those when he goes to his next slide, but this is it. This is the full extent of the changes, and so just wanted to really flag and note what we're talking about and what it does. Great.
So as the Secretary referenced, here's some of the recent last few years examples of the uses out of the TPOF fund. You can see here Chesterfield EDA, Virginia Port Authority, Williamsburg EDA, Albemarle County, and actually in the Appropriations Act that includes this revised notification requirement, there is a proposed application of TPOF there as well, which is another example of would not be able to happen without updating these guidelines first. So as the Secretary has detailed, this is an item for the action agenda. After your action, assuming that you approve it, the revised guidelines will be posted to Town Hall for review and comment for 30 days. And then the administration will provide copies of these revised guidelines to General Assembly leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Minshew.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Hutchinson. I'm just curious, if the MEI committee does give a response, would that be something along the lines of, we'd like more information, we'd like to cross-examine the project? Because I don't remember them doing that before on a TPOF project. I'm just curious what procedurally would happen if they were to ask a question or interpose an objection.
So the rights that they would have, as I believe, as it's structured in the code, again, if they receive this, they have 30 days. If nothing is said, it is effectively approved. I do think during that 30-day period, they have the right to ask for additional information. I do also think they have the right to say essentially they object during that 30-day period. To date, we have never had an opportunity where they have objected to a project. I think the way I would interpret this is they just want to ensure that they are aware of the use of funds and have that opportunity before it's gone. So I don't think the issue or the concerns, excuse me, and again, I was not a part of the conference committee, so I may miss them. I apologize if anyone listening online knows of something that I'm not articulating, but I think the issue is with the 14 days and the people who received notifications, there was concerns that perhaps that 14-day period had passed prior to people being aware that those funds were going out. And I think that was the concern that they're trying to get at. And so I think it's just preserving and ensuring their ability to be aware of the potential grants prior to them happening. I think in the expanded I talked about the difference of delivery, but it also changed who it goes to. So before it just went to the chair of Senate Finance and Appropriations and the chair of House Appropriations, you might imagine those individuals get a fair amount of correspondence via email. And so something like this could potentially get missed in an inbox that has that kind of volume of incoming, but it also included the staff of those committees. And I think that is kind of a key change there to make sure that those individuals are aware of this and can flag it for the appropriate elected officials before we kind of cross that threshold. So they have all the rights that you've outlined, Mr. Minshew. To date, though, we have never had an experience where they have objected to the use of funds. The MEI portion is a relatively newer one in terms of TPOF. So if Mr. Hutchinson noted, TPOF was created in the last year of the Warner administration. This MEI provision, I believe, was added 2 to 3 years ago when the ability to direct funds in excess of $5 million was added to the TPOF as kind of an eligibility. Previously, grants could not exceed $5 million and were all kind of handled within the Patrick Henry building, if you will. That provision kind of said, hey, there may be projects that require further funds and are worth investment. We'll bring them to this body to have that discussion. And then they also said, because it's an amount in excess of $5 million, there also needed to be some awareness on the Assembly's part because the executive branch is given a fair amount of discretion in the use of these dollars.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Questions for Mr. Hutchinson? Thank you. Next, we have Director Zimmerman. I was looking down there. I didn't realize you already made your way back.
Good morning. I'm excited to talk with you this morning about rural transit here in a rural part of our state. For those of you who I haven't gotten a chance to meet, I look forward to spending time with you here over the next couple of days as the director of DRPT. So what we really want to do is just kind of provide an overview for you of the state of transit in rural Virginia. There's not going to be any CTB action today or tomorrow on this, but we do have an upcoming CTB meeting, some issues that we will be bringing before the CTB that this will be important background information for. I actually grew up in a rural part of America, in rural Minnesota. My family still lives in rural communities, and so this is an issue also very near and dear to my heart. I think what you will hear is in rural Virginia, as in many rural communities across the country, transit is really an essential service for people who don't have other options. As an example, nationally, the average resident in a rural area lives 10.5 miles from the nearest hospital or medical center. That is double the distance for average urban areas residents. And so distance really is a critical factor that public transit can help to fill the gap in providing. So in this overview that I'll go through in the next few minutes, we really want to explain what rural transit looks like here in the Commonwealth, how it's funded, and the challenges and strategies shaping rural mobility in Virginia. Rural transit is an essential part of Virginia's transportation network. Rural needs are growing faster than federal funding can keep pace. More rural communities are seeking public transportation options, and many rural agencies serve individuals with limited access or have low or fixed incomes and few alternatives, and so transit is literally a lifeline for a lot of those folks. DRPT is an essential partner. We do not, as a state agency, operate any local transit. So I know sometimes that's confusing to folks. What we do is we are a funding partner with you all through the Commonwealth Mass Transportation Funds and other resources that come through the CTB. We provide grant funding, both capital and operating funding support to local transit agencies who also receive federal funding, as we'll talk about, and also have local skin in the game as well to serve this public. DRPT also does provide a lot of technical assistance to localities and to transit agencies in undertaking this work. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about what rural transit looks like. Rural transit provides the same open to the public services as urban transit, but operates very differently given the geography and the constraints and challenges that it faces. Often agencies are traveling very long distances, very large geographic areas to serve the population. This could be an entire county or several counties that they are providing service to, and so that cost per rider tends to be a lot higher for rural systems than it does for urban systems, given those distances and the deadheads that they're facing. Services also include deviated fixed routes, paratransit, demand response, and microtransit models, and commuter routes connecting to nearby urban and job centers. Many rural communities are also served by human service transportation providers. These organizations provide support to individuals with disabilities, seniors, or veterans, and so you have to be an eligible population to be receiving the service through those different providers. Service in the specialized transportation realm is typically door-to-door, call-up-on-demand service. We also see van pools, which are not technically part of the public transportation ecosystem, but van pools and carpools are also funded through the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund, and they provide critical service in many rural communities. And we see that through DRPT's Commuter Assistance Program, for instance. We have a grant that we provide to Enterprise, who serves a number of different communities and providers. An example of this is George's Inc., which is a poultry processing plant located in Edinburgh, Virginia, and they have over 250 employees across 8 different counties who use the van pool that DRPT is supporting through that commuter assistance program to get to the jobs there at that plant. This is typical across the state. We see a number of other car pools, van pools that are supported through our programs, including some van pools that are supporting folks in the Coast Guard and the National Guard to be able to get to their training and job bases. So we wanted to provide a map for all of you and hope, especially our new members, but also our existing members, please reach out to the local transit providers in the districts that you're representing. You can see here we have about 40 transit agencies across the state. This includes specifically 20 rural public transportation agencies. So again, they're open to anyone who wants to take public transportation, and we see it really crossing across the state. Some of these transit agencies cross VDOT districts, again, because of the geography that they're serving. And we work very closely with VDOT and really appreciate the partnership because all of these are vehicles traveling on roads. And so where those bus stops are located, thinking about the park and ride lots and other opportunities that we, again, closely partner with VDOT and our local transit partner agencies also appreciate that partnership. You can see that the agency types systems to small single jurisdiction systems, and then we have almost 20 additional human service and special transportation providers. So again, DRPT, we don't operate any of this, but we are happy to fund and support and work with this. You still can see that there are gaps, though, across the state where we don't have coverage yet, and there are a number of feasibility studies and ways that we're looking at helping to support better coverage across the state to ensure that folks really can get where they need to be getting. Rural transit, we're seeing growing ridership. I want to note even during the COVID period where we saw a lot of dips in transit ridership across the state nationally, rural transit ridership actually held pretty steady. Again, this is a lot of essential transportation that is being provided through this service. What's pushing and motivating this? One big reason, again, is the population who is served. So these two maps, the map in purple is showing people with disabilities, individuals with disabilities. The map in green is showing our older adult population. You can see where the colors are darkest is where we have our greatest concentrations on both maps. Perhaps not surprisingly, those tend to be the more rural parts of Virginia, particularly in the southwest and in the Shenandoah and Appalachian Valley areas there where you can see higher concentrations. So again, really underscoring the essential service that rural transit is providing. Who provides this transit service in rural Virginia? Again, we have a mix of operators that are here working in partnership together with each other. The Area Agencies on Aging, critical partner for those specialized transportation services I mentioned. Many cities, counties also helping to fund and operate and plan for this. We have human service providers, but we also see nonprofits, planning districts, and transportation districts. So it's really a mix of public, private, nonprofit. Some of these agencies contract out all or part of the service with private providers. So it's an interesting mix, and that therefore also means if we think about this and we think about that map of providers, really a need for coordination. Even here in Bristol, there are multiple transit agencies that are serving this population, both funded through Tennessee, funded here in Virginia. How do we coordinate this? Again, at DRPT, we're working to facilitate through technical assistance that coordination, but also with the Connecting Virginia app, which a person can go to and find out what transit service is available to them and how do they support that. So how do we fund transit in rural Virginia? Multiple ways that it's funded. The federal government really is an important funding partner for our rural transit systems. Section 5311 is the Federal Rural Formula Grant Program, and there are specific federal formula that guides that funding. It is allocated, DRPT gets that funding, and then sub-allocates it to the recipients who we work with really closely to make sure that they are meeting all of the federal regulations that come with that federal funding. Unlike federal urban formula funding, rural federal formula funding, the 5311 program can fund both operating and capital costs. So for urban federal funds, it's only on the capital side. For rural, it's operating and capital. Why is that important? It's important because that is really some of the most precious money for transit agencies. Operating costs, always a challenge for agencies. We have some other resources that we can tap to get at some of the capital costs, but even there we see capital costs for rural transit agencies exceeding the resources that we have available. You can see here on this slide as well the match requirements that localities have for those federal funds, 50% non-federal match. We provide that through a mix of state funding and local funding. Capital funds also require a non-federal match. This program you'll hear about from my colleague Avery in a few minutes also helps to provide some funding for our Virginia Breeze, which is the inner city bus service. And so again, really important federal resources that help to fund these programs. Section 5310 is the enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. This funds both urban and rural areas, and funding is targeted through that formula funding. Urban areas in Virginia get a certain percentage of the funds, small urban areas get another percentage of funds, and then rural areas get their own percentage of funding. And so within that, because it's federally designated, anyone who's in those categories is kind of competing for that funding within those categories. So that rural apportionment for Virginia in fiscal year 26 is $2.5 million. We also have, through the Commonwealth Mass Transportation Fund, we have the merit operating and capital programs, the transit ridership incentive programs. I won't talk a lot about those today because we will be coming back to you in September to talk to you about some proposed changes for both of those programs. Some, the TRIP program, there was legislative changes made that we think really open up some exciting opportunities to fund more rural transit, but also changes that we're making in the merit program to better reflect some of the issues that I'll be talking about today. We also have state demonstration funding, which is used by a number of transit agencies to look to see, does it make sense to start a new service? If they're getting the demand, they're getting the request for it. And we've seen that especially in rural areas, kind of being able to use that to test out, is there a there there? If there is a there, then looking at other ways that they might be able to more regularly support the funding for that. And again, we've seen examples for that across the state. And then our technical assistance funds that can help to fund feasibility studies, a number of those underway, including even here in the Bristol area where they're looking at feasibility study to look at kind of filling the gap between coverage of here in Abington and how to work with that. So again, working really closely across these different programs. These different programs are important because we are really seeing a growth of transit in rural parts of Virginia. And again, that may come as a shock to folks, but hopefully not. Hopefully you're talking with your local transit agencies and you're hearing about that. For the last 4 years, we've seen steady increase in rural transit ridership. I mentioned rural transit ridership held steady even during the COVID period. We saw just in this last year, and here's an example with the Bedford Otter bus where we provided a demonstration grant in 2023 to see was there a there. There was a there. They've been able to build and grow that service and actually came in this last year for some merit operating assistance, which you all approved in the SIP last month when we came before you. We're also seeing micro transit, which is kind of a cross a little bit in my mind. The way to think about it is a kind of a cross between demand and fixed service, where in this micro transit in rural areas can be a more cost-effective way where you don't necessarily have the demand to support a full transit service, but you want to open that up to a broader number of folks. This is also where we've seen some really innovative partnerships with our human service providers as well. A number of future expansion feasibility studies underway, and then a factor, Mr. Morrison, you were talking and sort of made me think about this as well, as we've been hearing from folks, whether it is the desire to live in rural communities or the pressure of housing affordability in some of our urban parts of Virginia, we're seeing population growth in more rural communities. And you might have a household where they're kind of choosing to locate in one community and maybe one member of the household is working in an urban area to the right and one sort of the urban area to the west, and they're like living there and kind of thinking about those needs. And so we do see both through the growth of jobs coming into rural parts of the state and the growth of households, an increase in commuter demand service, which we're also looking at how do we support that. And then I already mentioned the growing aging population and people with disabilities, but I did want to call out a 2025 Joint Commission on Healthcare report that found transportation is one of the top barriers in accessing healthcare in rural areas. They had a number of recommendations in that report, some of which I'm happy to say we've already started to implement. It included, calling out the state should be putting more funding into paratransit support. In the budget that was just approved, we actually increased the state paratransit funding from $1.5 million to $2 million a year. And we've made changes to the TRIP program that allow for more innovative paratransit and specialized transportation services. But despite kind of what maybe sounds like we've got a lot of resources, so things must be going well, we also have a lot of challenges, both in the urban and in the rural transit space in terms of increasing operating costs, many of which are in some ways outside of a transit agency's control. We've talked before in CTB about the rising gasoline costs. That's a pretty big issue if you're running a bus that's running several hundred miles each day. Those costs add up quickly. And particularly this year for a lot of transit agencies, we're a little bit caught unaware by that cost increase. But we also have increases in salaries and wages across the country, and we see it here in Virginia. We really have a challenge with driver shortages. And so that is compounded both, if you have a CDL, it might be more appealing to go drive for Amazon or someone. So we're often competing to get drivers, to keep drivers, to maintain those, which also means we need to be offering competitive wages. We have increasing insurance costs, something that really is outside of the transit agencies. Not just healthcare premiums that have gone up, but auto insurance costs, liability insurance, a lot of different things. We at DRPT are looking at ways that we can maybe help to support transit agencies in being able to bundle and access kind of shared insurance costs for that.
Director, just a quick point of clarification. Is this over like a 5-year period, give or take, these increases?
Yeah, it's actually over, I think it's a 4-year period.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And we track this. We get information each year from transit agencies when they are submitting to us for funding. We get their operating and capital cost needs, so we're able to kind of closely track some of these changes that are happening. And then we also see administrative capacity can be a big challenge. A lot of these rural agencies, it's just a handful of staff. They often are wearing multiple hats. It could be that they're part-time working for the transit agency, part-time working for another part of local government, or they might be with the transit agency, they're doing the administrative role, they're also doing the dispatching, maybe they're even filling in for the operator if they're out sick. So that administrative burden, especially if you think about federal funding and some of the strings that come with that, this again is where DRPT is really trying to step in and support them on that. Vehicles, we're seeing a larger percentage of vehicles that are staying in service beyond what have been kind of the recommended life cycle for a vehicle. They're doing that to kind of stretch the funding as far as they can, but that creates higher maintenance costs and also can have mean you have fewer vehicles available. So again, if you follow kind of, news story, and there have been a few of these over the last year, not being able to have weekend service or not having evening service or things, where's the driver? They're not showing up. All these factors kind of coming into play for rural transit. So DRPT, we've been looking, again, at kind of these rising cost challenges that are impacting. We have more rural transit providers competing for kind of that limited pool of funding. We are projecting that there will be a gap of roughly $5.5 million annually between the federal revenues that we receive through those programs I mentioned and through the needs. Already we're seeing that most of the federal funding is being used largely just for operating costs, and then we're finding other ways to support the capital costs. I should also note this is likely conservative given we don't know what's going to be happening with federal funding. Right now, Congress is debating the next federal reauthorization. The current proposal does have decreased funding for federal transit, so it's something we're keeping a close eye on with this gap and how it moves forward. So how are we responding? I mentioned already some of the technical assistance that we do. Happy to talk with you all more about that. But we're really looking at, are there things that we as a state agency can kind of help to scale and take on to support for these many local transit agencies so they don't have to worry about marketing the benefits of transit. So again, the Connecting VA app is a way to kind of tap in and get this information. Technical assistance we can do through some of the statewide planning studies that we can do so they don't have to take that work on. Also doing more to support peer learning of really what's working. Is there something happening in one agency that could be applicable for another agency? Next month, we'll actually be doing a CEO roundtable at the Community Transportation Association of Virginia's conference to look at rising capital and operating costs for rural and small transit providers to see how we can support them. We also later this month are going to be hosting in Richmond. If any folks are there and want to join us, we're actually going to be hosting a regional convening to really look at paratransit and mobility management solutions. Again, how can we better coordinate and collaborate across systems to find cost efficiencies and improve customer service? And then we also have been, as I mentioned briefly, we've been working to really prioritize those precious federal resources for the operating expenses to make sure that service is not being cut or reduced for agencies, and I should say for the riders in those communities because this is such essential transportation service. And then continuing to leverage federal discretionary funding. So for instance, in 2025, DRPT applied and received a federal bus and bus facilities grant, which is through the 5339 program. We did that as a state agency, and through that, we were able to actually support, I believe it's 8 different rural transit agencies to purchase 78 vehicles to replace vehicles that had extended beyond their life service. So we were able to kind of take that on, provide the resources, and reduce that burden for localities and get new vehicles out on the roads. But we will be coming back to you in coming months to talk about some additional strategies that we are exploring, and we really want to have a lot more conversation with rural operators and communities to talk through. One of these things is the Virginia Breeze, which will be the next topic on the agenda. I mentioned we use some of those precious 5311 federal funds for that. We're checking to see if there are other state resources that we might be able to bring in to help fill the gap. We started to do that this year, where we actually use some of the TRIP funding to support service on the Virginia Breeze. If we can kind of find other ways to be funding the Virginia Breeze, then that frees up some of that money, again, for rural transit needs through the 5311 program. We are doing a feasibility study right now that, again, will be coming back to you to look at both financial feasibility for the Breeze, but also potential new routes or increased service on that intercity bus network. We also are exploring right now ways that we might want to revise what has been our traditional policy around state and local match for capital projects. I mentioned for federal funds, it's a 20% non-federal match. DRPT has been providing about 16% of that non-federal match and 4% coming from localities. We're looking to see should we be making adjustments on that to perhaps ask localities to put more funding in, or maybe we modify the state amount to be able to stretch those funds even further. But we know that local budgets are also stretched, so we need to have conversation with localities to see what might make sense and consider how we might phase in that type of approach. So we have no change happening for the current fiscal year, but it's something we want to explore more. And then extending the minimum useful life of certain buses. We do know that some of our 4-year buses, we think we could maybe expand that to 5 years. However, we continue to see we have not recovered on the transit side of getting vehicles replaced in what I would call a timely fashion. So it used to be, 6 to 12 months you could reliably account on that bus procurement you put in and getting that bus out running on the streets. Now it's more like 18 to 24 months to get that bus from the manufacturer and out on the streets. So that's really been impacting, and you'll see that in some of the things, again, will be coming before you of asking for, some adjustments in projects we funded because it's just really taking a lot longer for these vehicles to come from the manufacturer, and the costs have also been increasing from the manufacturer beyond what was originally anticipated. Cooperative procurements is something we are doing at DRPT right now and are looking at there are additional things we might be able to do, for instance, with software technology, with the insurance items that I mentioned, with other service deliveries. This is something we hear is really popular and supported by our transit agencies, where we as the state can kind of get economies of scale that then can get a better price and can get more vendors to have more competitive processes and better customer service. And then continuing to look at ways that we can, again, leverage other resources like the bus discretionary grant example that I gave you, and with the TRIP program that we'll be talking more about next time that we're all together. So that was kind of a rapid, quick-fire state of rural transit. Happy to answer any questions today or over the next couple of days when we're spending time together. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Zimmerman. I also just want to thank you for kind of, bringing DRPT's expertise to really work with these rural transit agencies. I think some of the efforts you're doing here, like how can the state and our staff partner with these agencies, which often don't have a ton of staff. So yesterday, we actually went on a tour, Director Zimmerman, myself, and Dr. Schul, Carter, and Michael also went, and we met and talked with the Bristol and Peel about their transit system. They have one, I think, part-time transit official that helps run that system there. And so, that individual has a myriad of responsibilities: gas, employees, buying buses, in addition to the other roles that they have. And so I think using our staff to figure out how can we partner with these agencies to really bring our expertise to bear to create efficiencies and really help, I think is just something great. So I just want to thank you for bringing attention to that effort there. And then clearly this is going to be the first of several discussions. You're getting a theme here on some of our presentations. We come with the intro and then we come back with kind of further thoughts and discussions here. So really look forward to seeing what you bring before us in future months, and then very interested to see if members of the board have any questions. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, and Dr. Zimmerman, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. I was just curious as to the extent to which we're using technology to help improve the efficiencies. I was in Austin, and obviously got Waymo running all over the place there. So are there things that constrain us legally in the Commonwealth that don't allow us to deploy these? And are we thinking about and studying what does that next generation of transit look like, where maybe it's smaller and more nimble and autonomous?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say there's no legal barrier per se, kind of generally speaking, right? I'm sure once we get into specifics, there might be some things. I know there's a whole AV work group on some of those legal issues, but technology is certainly coming into play. I think we see that with some of the micro-transit that's really been exploding across the Commonwealth, but especially in rural areas. And even there, we've seen VIA has been a provider for a lot of that, but even now more competition is coming into that marketplace, and so we're seeing some new folks kind of entering in that technology of kind of using your phone to be able to dial up. I don't know if, hopefully folks haven't had this experience, but maybe you know someone who has. Traditional paratransit, you literally have to call a day ahead of time and sit on the phone until some human answers you and lets you know, yes, can they or can they not. And so I think technology to help with some of the software, with some of the dispatching, with some of the just being able to program that and think that through. In terms of kind of the Waymo AV future things, I think we still need to see what comes with that. Does that make sense or not in a rural context? I had an opportunity to do some work with AARP for a number of Virginia communities. What was interesting to me is talking to people who use this service and hearing over and over from folks like their actual personal interaction with the driver and with some of the other passengers was like a really significant part of their life. Like for some folks, like that was the connection that they had, and they maybe needed assistance getting in and out of the vehicle. So I don't think technology is quite ready to kind of replace that, but I do think that, you know, there's ways that we can support that. That's part of why we're trying to do these peer learnings. And also excited for the changes to TRIP, that the spotlight is really around innovative paratransit and micromobility. Again, how do we think about technology, not just the vehicle, but there's a lot of software technology stuff we can do to kind of get transit up to current times. Yeah.
Question for Director Zimmerman? Well,
Thank you
so much. And Mr. Doherty, before you come up, in the spirit of better late than never, it has come to my attention that I forgot to do the Pledge of Allegiance at the outset of the meeting. So if you all would indulge me and we could do the pledge again, better late than never. Thanks so much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate the board's indulgence there. Mr. Doherty.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. My name is Avery Daugherty. It is a real privilege to be here with you today. Today I'm going to be giving an overview of the Virginia Breeze intercity bus program. Virginia Breeze is a statewide network that connects communities, supports access and jobs and services, and strengthens Virginia's overall transportation system. Over the past several years, it has become a strong example of how intercity bus can efficiently link rural and urban areas while supporting the Commonwealth's broader transportation goals. And just as Director Zimmerman said, no CTB action today. Just wanted to really provide a high-level overview of the Virginia Breeze and the benefits that it can bring. So the Virginia Breeze operates every day with a round trip on each of the 5 routes it now has. These routes connect the western and central parts of Virginia to Washington, D.C., and also now stretches from the Shenandoah Valley all the way to Hampton Roads. DRPT manages the planning, performance, tracking, branding, I call customer experience, and coordination with other transportation modes. And the day-to-day operations are handled by currently our partners Academy Bus and Dillon's Bus Service, who provide the drivers, the training, and maintenance for the vehicles. It's a turnkey setup that gives us consistent service across the state, strong reliability, and good cost efficiency, while still allowing DRPT to maintain direct oversight. So the Federal Transit Administration requires every state to address intercity bus needs, and as Director Zimmerman pointed out here a minute ago, at least 15% of rural transit funding has to support those services, unless the state can show that those needs are fully met. So instead of simply passing that money along to private companies, Virginia made a concerted choice here, an effort to address that, and we decided to build a complete statewide public intercity bus network that the Commonwealth could count on, which meant that we would still be available in places where the private carriers had stepped away. So many rural and underserved communities were losing access to basic transportation, and the Virginia Breeze really helps fill that gap by providing reliable and affordable, environmentally responsible service that connects people to jobs, to education, to healthcare, and major destinations across the state. So why the Virginia Breeze matters? Honestly, Director Zimmerman put this very well for a rural presentation. It's a lifeline for many communities. It's especially in rural areas felt, where transportation options are limited and sometimes just don't exist at all. It really helps people, as I mentioned, to reach jobs and schools, medical appointments, and other important destinations. And several of our routes run along some of Virginia's most congested corridors. Every Virginia Breeze trip helps cut down on that single occupancy vehicle travel, also reducing congestion and lowering emissions. Just simply put, it's important because we're providing service in places where, as I mentioned, bus companies no longer operate, making sure Virginians still have access to travel when and where they need it. Since launching our first route in 2017, Virginia Breeze has grown to a steady service that it is today, and really in an intentional way has been built the way that it has. New routes like the Piedmont Express and Capital Connector were launched in 2020, followed by the Highlands Rhythm in 2021, and most recently, as I mentioned, the Tidewater Current, which launched here just a few months ago, has expanded service into nearly every region of Virginia, which is now our first east-west route that operates in the system. And each expansion has been based on data and real community needs. Every new route, we've seen ridership grow pretty consistently, which tells us that Virginians rely on and value long-distance travel options that are safe, reliable, and most importantly, affordable. When we look at ridership, this is a chart of ridership growth over the past 4 fiscal years. Virginia Breeze has really shown a steady, reliable growth along all routes. In 2023, the system carried approximately 56,000 passengers, which was about a 29% jump from the previous year, a post-pandemic rebound that showed that the Virginia Breeze had really regained its footing as a dependable long-distance travel option. In 2024, ridership increased again to just under 62,000, which was another 9% uptick. And that told us that the system wasn't just recovering, it was really gaining real momentum. And then again in 2025, we saw ridership hit 27,000, which was an 8% increase. And year over year, we did see growth start to kind of level off a bit into more of a steady pattern, but demand really remained strong across routes, especially on the original route, which is the Valley Flyer, and the Highlands Rhythm, which service the 81 corridor. And in FY26, we saw ridership hit over 71,000, which was another 6% increase. And while the percentage growth, as I mentioned, is moderating, overall ridership really continues to climb, and we're excited to see Virginia Breeze operating at the highest levels since the system has started. So the key takeaway is that demand is rising at a stable pace. Virginia Breeze has moved from a rapid post-pandemic recovery into long-term consistent growth, and it shows that we're providing reliable service. At the same time, we know that growth is slowing compared to earlier years, and that's a major focus, as Director Zimmerman mentioned, for our comprehensive Virginia Breeze study. This work's going to help us understand changing travel patterns, identify where demand is now leveling off in some areas, and really find new opportunities to strengthen service and improve multimodal connections. This steady performance, combined with our deeper analysis underway, I think is giving us a real solid foundation as we plan future frequency improvements and connections with other transportation modes.
Mr. Doherty, before
Yes,
you
sir.
go back to that slide,
Yes.
just want to flag for everyone looking at the bar charts, the Tidewater Current started in late April of 2026, so that is not a year kind of figure that you see there. So it's basically 2 months of ridership. And so again, for the first year, if that had been a full year, it would have been closer to like 6,000. So back in line with some of those other types of services. But did just want to note, we didn't have one route that was getting like 1/6 of the ridership of all the other routes for a year. That's a brand new service that was just started earlier this calendar year, but at the end of the previous fiscal year.
Secretary. All right. So this, it shows that Virginia Breeze connects riders to many parts of the Commonwealth's major transportation hubs. This map really identifies routes that link directly to key Amtrak stations across Virginia, to Metro Rail Silver and Orange lines near Washington, D.C., to West Falls Church Metro Rail Station, and to some major airports, including Washington International and Richmond International Airport. We also serve many of Virginia's largest universities, including Virginia Tech, James Madison University, UVA, VCU, William & Mary, Longwood, and Radford, to name a few. These connections really make it possible for and easy for riders to move between intercity bus, rail, air, travel, and local transit, strengthening Virginia's statewide multimodal network. So some of our highest ridership stops include Washington Dulles Airport, as I mentioned, Harrisonburg, Washington, D.C. Union Station, and Blacksburg. And they really show how the Virginia Breeze supports major travel markets. These highlights, I think, show demand where we see airport access, university travel, and broader regional mobility. So the data makes it clear that our network is aligned with corridors that have a steady, long-standing travel need, which means we're directing resources, we hope, where they make the biggest difference. But there is work to be done. And I want to just spend a moment here and highlight this picture as well. Most folks don't know that our Virginia Breeze is ADA compliant, although we don't have many passengers that are in need of this service. We do want to point it out and want to make sure that people know that Virginia Breeze is for everyone. It serves a mix of Virginians carrying students, full-time workers, and riders from many different backgrounds, income levels, et cetera. A large portion of our riders are young adults, and more than 70% of all trips are for social or recreational purposes, which tells us that the Breeze is not just a critical way to get around, it really also helps improve quality of life by connecting people to family, to friends, recreation, and opportunities across the Commonwealth.
Mr. Director, just out of curiosity on that slide, is this what we expected when we set up the Breeze to have kind of, because just to be candid, I'm surprised by the kind of the distribution of both incomes, ages, and purposes of trips. Did we have expectations on this when we created the Breeze? Like, and if so, like, is this aligned with them? Is this like different? Because I don't know, it's not what I expected personally. Which again, I don't run buses, so there's no reason why my expectation should be what actually happens. But I'm just personally kind of interested in that.
No, thank you so much for that question. To me, this is what's exciting. This is why I love what I do, and I'm privileged to be able to support the Virginia Breeze for the Commonwealth. Seeing a variety of people ride is exactly the magic of transit, in my opinion. So to answer your question, when we first started, predominantly we saw a lot of student travel up and down the 81 corridor. It was not designed in that way. That is just our demographic that we served at the time. And as people started to hear of the Virginia Breeze, we start to see year over year those numbers change. And that's exciting to me. We do take a survey annually to kind of poll who is riding and get a snapshot. But now with 5 routes that are really stretching all throughout the Commonwealth, we're seeing increases in different demographics riding, which is very exciting.
Thank you. John Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm just curious as to private bus service. Has it been replaced by the Virginia Breeze? Is that one of the reasons we've seen increase in ridership? Do we still have private bus services out there that are competing with the Virginia Breeze? What does that picture look like?
Thank you for the question. So Virginia Breeze, first and foremost, due to how the FTA designed it, it was intentionally built for underserved rural communities. So the original, and I promise I'm going to get to your question, the original intent was to put it in areas and to really provide that service for areas that just don't have any other options. That was a direct result of the private sector essentially abandoning our rural communities in the Commonwealth. There has been different market changes, various, consolidation of the intercity bus market nationwide, acquisitions of major companies, legacy providers that have contributed to changing environments. I can say that the Virginia Breeze, we really do look at that, and we want to make sure respectfully that where there is demand, we can focus resources in other areas. However, we do really intend to have Virginia Breeze be something that is consistent, where if we do have some temporary providers, maybe that are just online service providers, they may only offer some trips 1 or 2 days a week, sometimes may cancel trips as well. So I think our consistency has really helped for those areas, but it's something we're continuing to watch and to monitor. Yeah.
Mr. Doherty, just to get to Ms. Dunlap's, there are still, my understanding, and I'm stating this so you can feel free to correct me if in fact it is wrong, is that we do still have a fair amount of private bus service in certain corridors where kind of the market supports that. So like, for example, I believe near my house in Richmond is like the Flix bus, which I think is what Greyhound is now called, or at least is now marketed as. And so we still have a number of private operators. They're just mostly concentrated in the more urban corridors. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. So Flix and Greyhound being the largest legacy provider, with that acquisition, we did see quite a decrease in service offered to Virginia. We also most notably want to point out that Megabus, which was owned by Coach USA, has a new parent company now. We did see them stop operating service. So while they do still operate under I shouldn't use that word, while they still sell tickets under the Megabus brand, they got out of the intercity bus operating business, being that they went bankrupt. So we saw a lot of those services that we connect to that used to take us from Washington, D.C. To Philadelphia to New York, those started to decrease. To answer your question, it is a changing market. As these companies consolidate or move, we definitely have seen a lot of shifting trends. Virginia typically is not as served as other states as heavily with Greyhound and Flix, though.
Thank you.
So I'm talking about the funding structure. It's funded primarily through the FTA, as I mentioned, and Director Zimmerman mentioned, our 5311F program, which is a 15% carve-out of our federal apportionment for rural bus. With the additional support of the Commonwealth 6-year improvement program, and also fair revenue, which covers a part of our operating costs. We, DRPT, closely monitor performance really to make sure that this service stays efficient and sustainable. One big advantage of our turnkey operating model is that DRPT doesn't have to pay separately for bus purchases and keeps the Virginia Breeze cost effective while allowing us to focus resources on planning, oversight, and making sure that the service connects well with other transportation modes. So the chart shows fiscal year 26 revenue sources. The light blue section represents about $3.5 million in annual federal funding. The purple section shows roughly $400,000 in state TRIP funding that's been provided for the program. And the green section reflects the fair revenue, which is about $2.3 million each year. And that really helps to reduce our total operating costs. So without that fair revenue, our cost to operate would be significantly higher.
Secretary.
Mr. Davis.
Question and a comment. I like the business model that I see here. And my question is, because that fare box revenue is approaching 40% of its is there anything that we can learn from this or take this model and make an application to areas where the business model is not quite as efficient as you mentioned with we're partnering with the private sector to actually accomplish a need. Can any of that translate to other types of transportation? Maybe what Ms. Zimmerman reported on with rural transit. Or is it just an apple and an orange? If you go there, you're going to lose 6 buckets of funding if you try to make this application fit over here. Is there any nexus there where we can, replicate this model into other programs?
So that's a really good question. Thank you, Mr. Davis. The Virginia Breeze and intercity bus, I think this is important to mention, is a very different model than local transit. It's not, I think, a fair comparison to see a 40% fare revenue, or fare box recovery, we call it, for intercity bus, comparing that to a local transit service provider. Mainly because on a day-to-day, you don't know who's going to be riding on a local transit. Plus, the fares are significantly different. And some, in a lot of cases, with examples in Virginia, are zero fare. So I think the advantage that the intercity bus program has for Virginia is that people do purchase their tickets ahead of time. We can make some calculated decisions looking at capacity and add additional buses where needed. So we often drive up our fare box revenue recovery rate significantly because we target those really high travel days by adding more capacity to it. So we're operating those buses fuller. That, again, to answer your question, I think that for local transit and other modes, it's going to be difficult to really compare those because the access, I think, is so important for all transportation, but because of the advantage we have with sort of a reservation system, it does give us that higher fare box recovery.
I'd also just mention, if I might, sorry. Underscoring what Avery, Mr. Director said is the fare model is different. You sort of expect to pay more if you're traveling more, and you're kind of thinking of that with the rail or an airport situation. But I did want to note, like, even within the public transit agencies I mentioned for rural communities, some of those do have a contractor model that they use, and that is part of the work that we do with folks on their feasibility studies and their demonstration studies to see, does it make more cost sense to contract that service out in a turnkey model or some portion of that versus to have the agency take that full cost on it. So of the 20 rural transit providers, I think it's 6 that do contract out service, and I think even the microtransit often is contracted out with VIA or another private provider to do that. So I think that is a space where we're seeing folks kind of exploring different models around that. So it is, I think, not apples to apples. There are differences as noted, but even within that space, I think folks are looking at where can they get some cost efficiencies.
So if you can't get the fare box revenue, maybe you can eliminate some cost, which helps it. My comment beyond that would be, looking at the map, I would argue that there are some underserved communities below Richmond on I-85. Gaps there. If and when the opportunity ever comes, if that could be looked at for potential expansion of service along those corridors, I think our underserved communities in Southside Virginia would benefit from that. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And Mr. Doherty, I think your last slide will get into this. So there is a comprehensive study that he noted earlier, and so we'll get there. There's just one other thing I just wanted to say on the fare box, and I appreciate everything that was said about the purchase of service. The federal rules are pretty flexible, so it shouldn't create problems there. And as Director Zimmerman noted, we have a number of agencies that take advantage of that opportunity. I do think on the fare side, just to hit what Director Zimmerman said again, I don't think and again, I always want to see great fare box recovery, right, where we can see it. So nothing I'm saying here is intended to take away or detract from that kind of point. I just think this is something that people don't do every day. And as Director Zimmerman noted, they're going further. And so just like with a train ticket or an airline ticket, you can generally charge a slightly higher fare compared to something that people might do on a daily basis, twice a day to get to and from work. And so I think that is a factor there, which is not to say we don't have systems that haven't seen this type of fare box recovery, and that we should be happy when we do see it, right? And so I just wanted to flag, though, like, I think for the trip you do once or twice a year, you will pay more than you will for the trip that you do twice a day. And so I think that's another kind of distinction in terms of what can be charged for the fare there.
So as Virginia Breeze demand has grown, as I mentioned, we've added extra trips to keep up with that demand and that pace. At the same time, as Director Zimmerman also pointed out, costs across the transportation industry, things like fuel and wages and insurance and vehicle purchases and parts, really have been rising. So since the pandemic, these inflationary pressures, specifically to intercity bus, have increased our system-wide cost by about 15% each year. Looking ahead to FY27, just want to note that it is expected that our net operating costs will reach approximately $4.7 million. This in large part due to the addition of the new and first east to west route, the Tidewater Current. These estimates, just want to point out, do line up with national trends for long distance travel and statewide bus programs, reflecting both strong demand and realities of providing dependable, high-quality daily service. Excuse me. So the next phase, as the Secretary has mentioned here, is really going to be focusing on smart ways to grow the system, improving how we connect with intercity bus and regional rail, and really making sure that the program stays sustainable over the long term. So we're looking at where we can adjust with service frequency and stronger regional connections, helping to create better time transfers with rail, airports, and local transit. We think that these improvements will, as a result, boost ridership and give travelers more flexibility, especially in rural and underserved areas. As a part of the comprehensive study, we're examining long-term funding strategies and options, as well as opportunities for expansion and ways to keep the service most affordable for riders. That includes looking at rising operating costs, limited availability of 5311F funding, and the impact of new intercity bus companies that are changing travel patterns in key markets. We're also reviewing how fare structure is working, whether reduced fare programs could make sense, and pricing strategies that support both affordability and financial stability. We're closely watching market trends, and this will also look at slower year-over-year ridership growth to try to better understand where additional frequency, where applicable, makes the most sense. More daily trips or new corridors where they could be most effective. So looking at how we can evaluate and strengthen coordination with intercity and regional rail, passenger rail, which supports multimodal corridors and future rail investments by improving connections. Taken together, this work positions Virginia Breeze to remain an affordable, dependable, and well-aligned transportation option that continues to meet essential mobility needs while adapting to changing funding conditions and long-term operational challenges.
So, Mr. Doherty, I'm hearing some interest from the board in this comprehensive study. So I guess my question to you would be, I see it's going to be complete in spring of 2027. Should we assume that we'll be getting some sort of interim update along the way to see some kind of the initial findings and provide feedback?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And just want to point out that because this is a very robust study, there'll be different pieces completed at different points. The financial sustainability piece of this should be completed the end of April, and the overall study should be finalized by the end of July. Okay, I wanted to just mention real quick that riders can plan their trips and learn more at virginiabreeze.org. Every day, the Virginia Breeze really helps people across the Commonwealth get to work. As I mentioned, school, recreation, and long-distance travel. Behind the scenes, this is important. I wanted to give our communications and marketing team a big shout out. They really play a huge role in keeping the service visible, accessible, and easy to understand. They create digital content, run targeted promotions to reach new riders, and actively share updates with partners and stakeholders to encourage ridership and build awareness. We also track performance platforms, reach out to communities that may not yet be familiar with the Virginia Breeze, and ensure that Virginians really have a clear, timely place to go to get information about their travel options. And over the years, I do want to just say that the Virginia Breeze really has become a nationally recognized service model. DOTs often routinely contact DRPT for guidance as they develop or expand their own intercity bus profile, which I think really kind of shows the demonstrated impact and what we've been able to contribute beyond our borders here in the Commonwealth. And Mr. Secretary, with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And as I see this slide, I realize your name is spelled slightly differently there than it is on the agenda. So I think I've been saying your last name incorrectly the whole time. Is that correct?
Daugherty is correct.
Daugherty, yeah. So it's not Doherty. So apologies, Mr. Daugherty, for mispronouncing your name for the last 30 minutes as we've been going through this. And again, just want to thank you for the presentation. I also just think, folks, like this is an example of, like, to go back to where this started, you saw on his slide that it started in 2017. The reason that happened in 2017 is because in 2016, basically what's required every year by federal rules under the 5311 program is that a state must certify they are meeting all intercity travel needs, and if they will not certify, cannot certify, then they must use some amount up to 15% of those funds for intercity bus service. And a story that I guess people will now know is at that time, I brought that certification to the governor's office and they said, well, this is interesting. What background, what backup do you have to say that these needs are being met? And I said, well, this has been signed for the last 20 years. They said, that's great. What backup do you have to demonstrate that these needs are being met? So I went back to then DRB Director Jennifer Mitchell, and I said, what backup do you have? And what we then decided is we were going to go study where needs were not being met, and it turned out there was a whole host of needs along the 81 corridor, particularly starting, with Tech up to DC, and that's literally why the first bus service started, is because someone asked a question saying, hey, are we sure? And so this is kind of my point of why I always say, please ask questions. There are no dumb questions, right? At that point, something had been happening for basically 20 years, and someone said, I've never seen this before, and I don't understand if this actually is happening, so please explain to me why. And they were right. So we started that first service. We had, I think, whatever our estimates were, it was wildly exceeded in terms of ridership at that time. And as we've added new services, Mr. Daugherty has noted, we've seen, again, continued growth in that type of ridership there. But so it's just kind of, I think it's always important. That's why we should ask the questions, should always, challenge assumptions and other things, because it just took one individual challenging one assumption that had been made for a long time. And that's why we have this very, I think, nationally recognized successful intercity bus program here in the Commonwealth. And so with that, I also just want to see, are there any other questions from the board for Mr. Daugherty? Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And as someone who has had 4 children attend Virginia Tech, I am pleased that that was what triggered this whole thing. I guess my big question on this and other just transit elements, transit by definition requires a bit of a subsidy, right? Sometimes a smaller subsidy like this, sometimes a much larger subsidy like WMATA. I think in these presentations, and maybe even the study you're doing, it'd be very helpful to have a cost per passenger subsidy number so that we can track over time, okay, how are we doing on a cost per package? So it gives us the opportunity to do a cost benefit analysis as opposed to just being ridership being the benefit and we're not really looking at the cost side of it. So,
Absolutely. Yes, sir. We do have that. We do track that. I'd be happy to follow up with you.
Okay, that'd be super. And the other thing is if we can include both capital and operating costs in the per passenger subsidy. I know sometimes the industry standards just look at the operating costs, but we'll have both of those in there.
Mr. Minshew?
Mr. Secretary, great presentation. There was one stat that really jumped out at me, that it appears that 80% of all the trips are on the 2 lines that travel Interstate 81, the Valley Flyer and the Highlands Rhythm. And I would think that those 2 lines are probably pretty well into the black from fare box recovery. And I think I understand that. Matter of fact, I looked at coming down here to Bristol on the Virginia Breeze, the Highlands Rhythm. It was $52, and it left Dulles Airport around 2:30 and would have gotten down to Bristol at 9:20, which is that's a lot of potential single occupancy vehicles we've taken off Interstate 81. And had I taken that trip, I would not have made as many friends with the 18-wheelers in 81, so they'd coming down. And I would have taken it back home, Mr. Secretary, except the bus leaves Bristol at 11 o'clock, and I didn't think our meeting on Wednesday would be over by then.
I think that's an accurate assumption, sir.
But I would think that those 2 lines, for even one southbound, one northbound trip a day, that's a real success story. And it almost suggests to me that there might be room for a second bus trip, northbound, southbound. So any thoughts on why that Interstate 81 corridor is so popular compared to the other routes?
I'm a graduate of James Madison University. I also appreciate all the other universities, but I will say that that I remember working in local transit in Harrisonburg at the time, that there really weren't many options. There weren't, specifically if I'm speaking in the lens of a college student or a professor or anyone visiting, just in the university environments, there weren't options for travel beyond to DC without a very expensive taxi ride. That's the same story that I think you can say throughout the entire 81 corridor. As to why and how rapidly the success grew. I think the Valley Flyer route, it was one of the original routes, is operating at about 70% fare box recovery, while the Highlands Rhythm is somewhere around 40%. There's a lot of miles on those, though, and in order to make it efficient, we do see, more pockets of heavy populations riding from certain areas, but that doesn't mean there's any less significance of those areas in between. And those are the areas that I think I get most excited about when I see increases, even though marginally, because it shows that we're serving those communities, more specifically the rural, underserved communities. So thank you for your comment. Appreciate it.
Secretary.
Dr. Smoot.
Avery, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. What do you anticipate is going to happen to ridership about a year from now when passenger rail service is extended to the New River Valley area, which is basically the Virginia Tech and Radford University markets, which are a significant part of this market? Are we going to lose market share here, or are we going to have more people using public transportation up and down the 81 corridor?
I am looking at Director Zimmerman on this question, but happy to provide my perspective. I think it's going to drastically support the Virginia Breeze. They are sort of a coexisting feature for the Commonwealth. I think we're going to see, and that's part of this comprehensive study I mentioned, that we're really going to be analyzing ways that we can calibrate our service to better align, to better connect. So I'm seeing it as a huge advantage, and I'm very excited about it.
Dr. Zimmerman.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for that question, Dr. Smoot. Yes, this is where I think I'm especially happy to also wear the hat of being the board chair for the Virginia Passenger Rail Association. But we are actively talking right now with DRPT, VPRA, and with Amtrak of how can we, as part of both this feasibility study, but also even sooner than waiting for the study to end, how can we really better coordinate information, even being able, hopefully, we will see, I don't promise anything, but we are trying to push Amtrak to see when you go to amtrak.virginia to book, if it could even show which Virginia Breeze options are available. And as we look at scheduling, again, you know, that train service, which we're really excited to come into Roanoke and down to Christiansburg, it's still not going to be every hour, right? So we know there's still going to be service windows where when's the train coming? Can the Virginia Breeze kind of fill in some of those other spots during the day? Also looking at ways that we might be able to add service. We already are looking at opportunities once with the Long Bridge study, or Long Bridge construction project that's underway. You know, we've really been trying to sync up for the Virginia Breeze so folks know that's another option to get from Richmond to DC and other points. And so absolutely thinking about this all as kind of a shared inner city ecosystem is something that we think is important, both with Virginia Breeze, with our passenger rail service, and also with VRE, of really thinking these things not in silos, but as a coordinated system. So wish us luck with continued discussions with Amtrak, and we will be happy to report back on that.
Thank you, Director Zimmerman. Any other questions for Mr. Daugherty before he retires from the podium? Well, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Thrasher giving an update on on-time, on-budget development and delivery results.
Morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Today, I'll be delivering to you all the annual update on the on-time, on-budget for both the engineering and construction programs. This will detail our FY26 project development results. It will show the trend analysis for both delivery and development. The purpose of this results is to show the performance of our construction program. There's no board action required based on the update that I'll be providing. This is an annual scorecard, so to speak, on how well we're doing. And I've been giving this since 2021 to the board. So I'm going to cover some additional items that I don't normally cover because we have new board members here, and the existing board members have seen this repeatedly for the last 6 or 7 years. We began measuring the project performance in March of 2003 with our dashboard, and again, we've been providing this update since 2021. So what is VDOT's dashboard? It's a performance reporting system for VDOT's engineering and construction programs. It's open to the public for their review. It meets the requirements of the Code of Virginia, as well as the CTB resolution entitled Project Dashboard, passed in March of 2005. These photos are what the dashboard screen looks like when you go to open it up on our website. The opening screen on your left shows overall progress on several areas: maintenance, safety, operations, finance, and finally, what's in the orange block, projects. When you enter the projects portal, you are directed to overall development, which is engineering on the right-hand side, top right, and delivery, which is construction performance numbers. And if you drill down into either one of these, you get the area which is shown in the bottom right corner, which is the project specific, where you can actually look up a project to find out whether it's on time or on budget for both delivery and development. So this is a slide you'll see when you go in. It shows the overall project development and project delivery across the state. Our targets are shown in orange. The percentages shown in red are our results from FY25. The percentages shown in black are this year's results for FY26. Overall, our numbers have gone up in 3 categories versus FY25, and down in 1 category, which is project delivery on time, which from 85 to 82. This slide is an all-encompassing scenario of all projects. So you'll notice that it's divided into 2 categories at the top: development and delivery. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that it has 3 different categories: all projects, which incorporates both VDOT and locality projects; VDOT projects, which are what it says, VDOT, and local projects. The black line on each category is our metric. And so just to give you a pretty quick overview, all projects on time across all scales. For VDOT, all projects on time, on budget across all scales. For locality, 3 out of 4. The only one we didn't get was on time for delivery. And you would think, well, that's not very good. That's great. We have been working very hard to get our local projects green on all fronts. And the previous 2 years, we had 2 and then 1. So this is a good step for us. We're moving in the right direction. Project development. This is a $20 name for the word engineering. So this slide shows 2 components. It shows both the number and the actual dollar amounts for projects for VDOT and localities. We also have 13 rail projects. What you're going to notice there is that we had 466 projects for roughly $2.5 billion. In FY26, VDOT had roughly $2.2 billion of that number. In FY25, we had $1.8 billion. So that's an upkeep of about 18% of the amount of projects that were VDOT compared from one year to the next. The locally managed projects in FY26 were $330 million. In FY25, that number was almost $400 million. That's a decrease of 17%. And so we think you're going in the wrong direction there. Well, we're not. We know that we need to look at quality versus quantity with our local projects. We have the Local Sustained Performance Program has been working diligently over the last few years to increase these amounts. We believe that the number of projects that we see for localities will continue to go down in the short term as we continue to invest time and money and effort with the localities to get them back on track. Statewide results for project development. Again, the FY25 results are in red and the FY26 results are in black. You can see we went up 6% in project development from both on time and on budget. Trend analysis. Statewide project development. So we've been tracking these trends since FY 2019. Our overall on-time performance percentage, which is the blue line, since 2019 has been 76%. The overall average for on budget, which is the orange line, since 2019 has been 81%. So we're moving in a good direction here. VDOT development, again, on time as an overall percentage average since 2019 is at 81%. On budget, the orange line performance percentage since 2019 has been 88%. Kind of flatlined a little bit on the on time, but again, flatlining and moving forward, we're looking good in those areas. Local project development. The average on-time performance since 2019 has been 70%. Again, that's the item in blue. Average on-budget performance since 2019, the line in orange, has been 72%.
And Mr. Thrasher, so what we see here is kind of a little bit of a distinction in the performance, kind of a VDOT who does these projects all the time, all across the state, and some of our local partners. Is it fair to say that there are folks who are performing above this on the local side, and those who are performing below this is kind of the average of all of our local partners who administer projects.
Yes, sir. There are quite a number that are performing at a stellar level. Yes.
And so, and this is, I think, Commissioner, maybe part of the reason why over the last 3 or 4 years, and I apologize, I know I'm going to butcher the acronym or the words, but the Local Sustainability Performance Program? Wow, that was a truly remarkable thing. That's why we put in place that program now where the department is kind of working hand in hand with a number of our local partners to kind of understand, like, you know, how can we help them? Do they have programs that are of a size that they are staffed to be able to deliver, right? And so all of this is done with the intent of making sure that the tax dollars that we're collecting and in turn allocating are being put to use. But again, you're going to, hear from local governments at times throughout the years, or over the course of the year, excuse me, as VDOT works with them. Sometimes the discussions can become tense, right? But that's all about making sure that we're driving these numbers in the same direction as where we're driving kind of the department's numbers. And so I think it's just important that we highlight kind of, again, why we're doing those things as we're talking about on time and on budget delivery. Mr. Gribben.
So I actually have a great case study on this very point. So the board will remember, the board that was here last year, remember that the city of Alexandria was below target, and we actually had to pull funding back from them. And we had a conversation about, do we do it now? Do we give them another month? We gave them another month. In the intervening time, the Northern Virginia office, Bill Cutler and his team, have worked very closely with Mayor Gaskin, Hillary Orr, and the city of Alexandria. And they have actually, is it LSPP? They are now above their LSPP target. So, I mean, not only are some localities outperforming, but also the district has done a great job under this program of working with localities to bring them to the point where they are now eligible, they've met their targets, and I think they will have, what's the term for reserve funding? The carry projects, carryover projects? So so next month, the carryover project, when the carryover project is awarded, their balance will be zero. Good. So it is now.
They will have eliminated their backlog.
Correct, they will eliminate the
go.
backlog.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So the story of this is we have an unusually dynamic mayor who is helping lead this, which was helpful. But this program and the district staff have been able to take a locality who was dramatically underperforming to the point where we have to take money from them, and they are now right on target.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
Just a
Payne.
quick question. These performance trends, does that include the smart scale projects at the local level as well?
That's correct.
And Mr. Thatcher, to Mr. Payne's question, so this is state of good repair, smart scale, and then does this include like maintenance projects, or is this, okay.
Our normal schedule work.
So everything that's going out to bid, is that maybe a way to say it?
This includes revenue sharing as well.
Oh, yes, very salient point that we'll be getting into after this presentation. Thank you.
That's absolutely right. I think to complement and maybe weigh in on this, we saw right around the COVID time period that we needed to take drastic action to be able to change these trends. So you can see the trend line on time. If we continued on that trend line in the engineering side, that just meant the delivery of those projects in the construction phase would have been lagging behind significantly. And we all know what has happened to inflation and the buying power of a dollar since COVID occurred. So having things remain on time and on budget in the engineering side of the house means that we can be delivering projects at a nominal cost and not fighting inflation through the construction period. So I think, again, this goes back to a win to the local sustainability performance program and continue to show the trend lines.
Okay. Thus far, I've been talking about the engineering components of the house. Now we're going to get into the construction. So project delivery for FY26, on-time delivery is down by 3% from 25, and on-budget delivery is up by 3% from 2025. Here's our statewide trend analysis. Overall, our on-time performance percentage since 2019 has been 78. Again, that's the line you see in blue. And the average on budget, the orange line performance percentage since 2019 is 93. Again, moving in a good direction. It looks like we were coming down on the on-time percentage, but again, we are much higher than the average has been over the years. VDOT project delivery, Our on-time performance decreased by 2% in 2026 compared to 25. Our on-time performance percentage average since 2019 has been 88%. Our average on budget, again, that's the orange line, since 2019 has been 95%.
Mr. Thatcher, really quick, is it fair to assume that dip we see in 22 is just COVID
Yes, sir.
related? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I noticed it's a
So
clear departure from the
let me
trend and
just-
an anomaly.
Let me say something about that 77%. That's partially true. We have a substantial paving program, and that number is in excess of $600 to $700 million a year. In FY 2022, the department worked with industry to revitalize how we put projects out for advertisement and the actual seasons in which they can actually work in. So what I mean by that is we worked out with the industry, we started earlier to finish earlier, so the quality of our payments would be enhanced. And what I mean by that is the later you work in the year, the harder you're fighting temperatures. Asphalt and cold weather do not go together. So that's the 77% is with the drop from that. It just took the industry about a year to be able to acclimate to that, and our normal pavement numbers are really in the mid to upper 90s.
Secretary. My question is, what drives the gap between on-time percentage and on-budget percentage? Because, I mean, theoretically, one would think that that those things should be always in parallel, one way or the other. So there's a difference between the two. Usually, it could be as little as 3% or as high as 18% in 22. But there's a difference every year in the two, and kind of what drives that difference between the two.
So it's, I don't know about that there's a distinct correlation between those two, the on time or on budget. We drive projects for construction. The budget analysis we do and the time analysis is set when we advertise a project. So we work with industry to make sure we're using the best schedules for that. I don't think there is a correlation between those two, just in my professional opinion, sir. If there is, I haven't seen it yet.
Well, Mr. Thatcher, it may be fair to say that there are trade-offs between the two. So sometimes a way you can stay on budget is by giving some relief on time for a contractor, and it may be easier to give on time if it's a few months than it is to seek a budget increase when we're working in a budget where we've allocated every dollar. So maybe that's also, there could be a reason there, but I will say, Mr. Moy, I guess you can wait, Mr. Thrasher, you can weigh in on that in 1 second, but I would say this is my 20th year kind of working here, and this has always been the case, which again, doesn't mean, to my point earlier, we should always ask the question, right? Because there may be a why, but this is something I've seen kind of extendedly, and I've also seen in other states. But that's like the one trade-off I know, Mr. Thrasher, that maybe could be an explanation.
We do that through change orders on projects, but again, that's the only linkage I would see to that. The next slide, I'm going to show you something that maybe I can add a little more flavor to that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Payne.
Mr. Chairman, just one other point. Given what I do in my practice, any inflationary challenges, I would say from back far as 2021 to even currently, it's pretty impressive to stay that close within budget on your end. Pretty
It's
impressive.
not an easy facet to do that, sir.
Yeah, very impressive.
Thank you. Okay, this is our local project delivery. What you're going to on-time performance percentages since 2019 have averaged about 58%. That's the blue line, and then the orange line, the on-budget, have averaged since 2019 about 89%. So getting back to what you said earlier, for localities, they do things a little different from how we do projects construction-wise. We have a final completion date. Localities sometimes put what they call substantial completions date in. Our projects are done when they're done. For localities, some localities, their project's done when they hit a substantial portion of it. So that makes an offset. It's much easier for localities to extend time rather than go back to boards and ask for additional funding. So maybe that's a little more about what you were talking about, but that, to me, is a direct correlation.
I would think that the state is better at estimating, because you have more tools, resources available to estimate versus a locality or it may be 1 or 2. Estimate how long it'll take to do a project or all of what's necessary to complete that project. So I don't necessarily find it that shocking that at the local level it looks that different, and not that it was terrible what I saw previously. It was just a question of those things were not the same and did not correlate at any point. So that was really kind of driving the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Wood, to your point there, like this slide always, like one, we're seeing good progress here. And again, the progress kind of starts with when the local sustainability performance program was like implemented. So again, kudos to the VDOT team. I think you're right. Like VDOT has an army of people that do this more than anyone else in the state. And so like to your point, like, yes, we should be getting better results than the locals. But this also just asked the question to me in certain places, and I've said this to the commissioner in private, so he's not gonna be shocked hopefully when I say this in public, is like, are there times where maybe VDOT should be delivering more of these projects that locals are choosing to administer? And to all the local governments listening, I am not saying local governments should not have the opportunity to administer projects. Far from that. It's just I think it's a question that should be asked when we see this continued kind of dissonance in performance of, are there, like, why is this happening? And sometimes the whys maybe there's advantages that are unrelated to the on-time or on-budget delivery, but where they're not, like, let's understand that. Or if there's whys that deal with like design or community engagement, let's understand that, let's understand those costs, and then let's just figure out what the right outcome may be. And the outcome may be what's happening today, or it may be something different, right? But I think it's worth asking the question when we see this difference in kind of performance, right? Because these are all tax dollars that everyone is paying. These are all products that provide some level of benefit to the communities in which they're located. And so the question is how can we get those put in place in a more timely manner, both for VDOT, but also for our local partners. So I'm saying this out loud now for the first time. I expect to say it again many more times over the coming months, but it's just a question I think we have to ask as we move forward. And again, for our local partners, I'm not presupposing an outcome. I'm just saying it's a question worth asking.
Mr. Secretary, if I might,
Commissioner,
since we're airing out some of our private conversations in front of the board, why don't we, there's partial of an answer to that for the board to recognize that the questions are being had with the local, with our local partners. Our district engineers are having those conversations, and you've heard it, at least the prior board has heard those conversations with the city of Charlottesville, trying to gain a balanced approach to right-sizing localities' projects. We are having, each of the district engineers are having those conversations with their corresponding local partners to be able to identify what can they deliver, maybe what they cannot deliver in a timely manner, and where we, VDOT, would come in to assist in the delivery of those projects. So I want to reiterate that, yes, we are having them. It's an ongoing conversation, and I envision this to continue to be a dynamic set of questions that are asked on a continual basis.
Very fair. Thank you, sir.
Secretary.
Mr. Davis.
Would it be accurate to say that the localities are taking on some additional bandwidth that through on projects, that way VDOT doesn't have to administer those projects and hire working, doing the projects, and measuring and monitoring the projects throughout its life cycle? So to me, it seems like they are helping, but we want that help done in a fashion that's consistent with how the state does business and how it manages projects. But I mean, if I saw that slide right, it's $340 million, $330 million book of business out there that the localities are taking on. I think they provide a nice value to the state in terms of bringing additional bandwidth to state resources. So. And getting projects done. So, yeah.
Mr. Davis, I think that's certainly a fair point that you raised there, right? Like there's obviously, there are resources required for this. I would also note, like, typically VDOT staff involved in delivery of projects bill to projects, so I don't think it creates an unfunded type of thing if VDOT were to step in, but I'm sure the commissioner has more to kind of note there.
Absolutely. Mr. Davis, this is not a new program to the department or to the localities. It's been in place probably a little bit more than 20 years. that we've been focused on allowing the localities who said that VDOT, in its one-size-fits-all mantra, does not meet the needs of its citizens. So we took on the opportunity for locals to take over in sophisticated localities to be able to take on the delivery of their projects, both in the engineering phase and the construction phase. This is just a continued refinement in their abilities to be able to deliver. And as we've gone through the ability to hire and then retain staff in a competitive basis, they're experiencing the same things that we do. I do think that there are some localities that may be better suited for this, the larger municipalities and towns and counties that can deliver those projects. We do have some localities that do maybe one project every 3, 4, 5 years, and it becomes a learning curve. In those cases, we may want to reconsider that, is it best that those localities go through the learning curve on a periodic basis. But yes, they are a vital part of our delivery. Slide 9 that the chief engineer showed with the bar charts or the histograms showing how many projects that we've had, they are roughly on a count basis. When I first came on board, it was about 60% VDOT, 40% locality. So they are delivering by number a large number of our projects, but however, by value, we've seen this trend line change over the years to something in about an 80% value to the department and 20% value by the localities. But that has shifted depending on the amount of monies that go to the localities. But they are a very important partner to delivery of the Commonwealth's transportation system as it stands today.
Okay. So the previous slides, I've been focusing on the dashboard. I wanted to show you where we are, what we've been doing. But what about where we're going? Where we want to be in our financial picture for the future? And what about the 15 to 20% that we don't hit on the metrics? What happens to that? So the project portfolio. This is something new that we haven't put forth to the board beforehand. The VDOT utilizes our dashboard to focus on the here and now as well as the past. What we needed to focus on more was the future and what we thought was going to look like, where we needed to be, and what happens to that 15 to 20% of the projects. So you're looking at the slide, you see the dashboard on the left and the observations we had on the right about once a project goes red. We did have a reduced focus on these projects that went red. It doesn't make them any less important than what we had. We just kind of lost focus on them. That created the backlog, and I don't know which one of the secretary or the commissioner let that cat out of the bag a little too quick, but but the backlog is work that we did not get on construction on time. Sir.
I'll chime in. No, let's stay on this slide for a second, Chief. So I think this is a very important slide as we move forward. When we took a look at the dashboard, and going back to those statistics that we showed, the dashboard represents projects that are on time and on budget by count. So let's think about by count. We could have a project or 10 projects that are valued at $1 million apiece, and then the next 5 projects that are each valued at $50 million apiece. We could hit the vast majority of those projects that are $1 million apiece, but miss, as we're showing, about 18 to 20% of the projects not meet the construction date or the date that we had promised. Well, those values of projects that we are not meeting are fighting inflation and not delivering the goods and services to the Commonwealth in a timely basis. So we needed to come back and take a step back, and the other part of this presentation is going to focus in on what is the value of those projects that are being delivered in a timely manner. Dashboard is backward looking. It is purely what did we do last year? And our performance metrics clearly indicate it. But the challenge that we have is how much funding do we have and the delivery of those larger projects to be able to make sure that we're delivering the true goods and services, not just by count, but the value of that project as it moves forward. There's a the center bullet on observations, once a project went red on the dashboard and we went to the next fiscal year, I'm going to say we forgot about it. Or we took our foot off the gas pedal. I shouldn't say we forgot about it. It's red, I'm going to go focus in on the next fiscal year's worth of delivery of the projects. This comes back to, that creates a backlog. And when we have, let's just take the high end of the observation, when we have 20% of the 80% making on time and on budget, we still have 20% of those projects that don't. It's those 20% that if I go to the next year, some of them do get delivered over the course of the next year, but some of them didn't. And so we have almost a snowball or a domino effect from one fiscal year to the next, to the next, to the next. So the portfolio is looking at what we need to deliver corporately, Commonwealth-wide, and then by each of the 9 districts on an annual basis. This is what I expect to deliver. Now, that's a leading indicator to say, we are going to stay focused, we're going to deliver what we said we were going to do, and then we'll use the dashboard to say, how did we do? But the portfolio is setting the expectations at the beginning and not necessarily at the end. Chief?
In the spring of '23, we reviewed projects that were previously scheduled to go to construction that year or earlier that were red. We prioritized reviewing the projects with larger unexpended balances of previous allocations. We found 89 projects that met that criteria. 63 were locally administered with $780 million in value. 26 were VDOT administered with $238 million in value, with a combined construction value of $750 million. These were projects that we were fighting inflation on, those factors that increased our costs, but the funding available to assist these projects was limited. So moving into FY24, we intentionally focused on these projects and began developing a more forward-looking approach to monitor and planning to work across the entire 6-year improvement plan.
Stay on that for 1 second, though. This is where the chief and I are going to tag team it. So 89 projects that were supposed to go to construction by the end of fiscal year '23. What this slide doesn't say is how old some of those projects were. We didn't miss it by a year. There's some that are in here that are 14 years old, 15 years old. 89 projects valued, total value at $1 billion. Think about what we've experienced inflation-wise on an annual basis, if it's 6%, 10%, over a 4-year period, the things that should have gone in by 2023 at $1 billion, a dollar is now worth 75 cents. So that value that was supposed to be created and delivered in time has eroded away. So this is why the department's taking a very corporate look at how we deliver projects and how we've identified a project portfolio. And the chief's going to get, I might back out a little bit of this, but and not dominate the presentation, but it's very important that we look at it from the portfolio basis, and then we take a step back and retroactively look at how we perform through the dashboard.
So in FY24, we started developing our strategic portfolio management approach. We focused on intentionally balancing the program funding, looking ahead into the future, as the commissioner said, into leading indicators versus the rear view or the existing day we do with the dashboard. And to keep in line and keep focused on the fact that money in should equal money out. Our initial progress was successful in drawing attention to emerging issues on the 6-year plan. So we memorialized this in our business plan, focusing on developing and implementing leading key indicators, as well as in directing our staff to prioritize project delivery targets on project value and the benefit to the public. So in January of 2025, Commissioner Britch issued an executive departmental memorandum directing VDOT to focus on several key guiding principles in executing our work. Execute projects in a timely fashion, setting standard timeframes for projects to reach construction based upon size and complexity. This applies to all projects in the 6-year plan, ranging from small, simple turn lane projects to larger interstate widening projects. Focus on eliminating the current and the future backlog of projects, keeping projects on their expected timeframes by making critical decisions on time, not allowing decision-making to churn, and aligning our guidance and direction on project funding underneath the CFO to ensure clear and consistency across the spectrum. So earlier I mentioned the construction backlog. So here's, as the Commissioner alluded to earlier, here's a more graphical depiction of that. Starting in FY 2025, we affirmed our statewide tracking of these areas. We had a construction backlog of approximately $1.3 billion. In 2 years, our districts and our local partners have reduced this by approximately 59%. That's not bad. That's pretty good. But did we fix the problem? We're always going to have a backlog. We're not going to be able to get rid of that. We'll never reach our metrics at 100%. However, we have to remember that what gets tracked gets done. Once a project is identified in our backlog, it's the expectation of the department that we will get that out to construction in 12 months. So even as new work comes on board, we are prioritizing the work that we have to get it out the door.
You done with the slide?
Sure.
So part of this, through that memorandum, was to identify the size of the projects, whether they had right-of-way or not, and that memorandum that is referenced in here identified expected timeframes for delivery to the construction phase. As we went through this process and identified those projects that were red on the dashboard, we found some projects that were $8 million sidewalk projects that were taking 13 years to deliver. Now, I cherry-pick my arguments with my district engineers very carefully and say it's taking 13 years for an $8 million sidewalk when down at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, we can build a $4 billion project in roughly 6-7 years. Where are we going wrong with this? So the arguments that are coming back, and you can see, I think this is a testament to the design staff to be able to focus on what they intend to deliver, the high-value projects on the delivery, and not just by number, but by the value of the projects to be delivered on an annual basis. We focused on those projects, the projects that were looming over our head. We have cut that down to a third. 2/3 of those things that were red and had been red are now gone. And we continue to, as the chief engineer said, we're always going to have backlog. It's not going, don't expect it to come in as zero. We'll always miss something at some point for some reason or another, but it's the magnitude on an annual basis that continues to decrease. So that blue bar shows what we anticipated to deliver. Might have missed it, but we pick it up and continue to get that project delivered within the next fiscal year. And it's a rotating basis. So we've gone from $1.3 billion in 2 fiscal years to $530 million. And I would venture to say we'll cut that again in half next year. So it is a testament to the chief engineer, the district engineers, and the design staffs to be able to stay focused. But it's also our local partners that are embracing the local sustainability program, as well as the portfolio and advancing projects in a timely manner.
I do want to piggyback a little bit on that. It is a testament to our staff, and there's no doubt about that. It's also a testament to the CFO and her staff. They have done a well of a job getting us to this point. I can tell you without their help, we would not be here. They have done, Kim and her folks have done an unbelievable job, and we're fortunate to have them. Next steps, where do we go from here? We're going to continue to reduce our project development backlog, reduce the risk of the 6-year plan, fighting against inflation. We're going to continue to monitor our annual construction targets and other project and performance indicators such that projects which have a slow progress, we are watching them rather than let them continue to churn. In the coming months, we'd like to come back to the board and propose some updates to the CTB policy on the 6-year improvement plan development, further institutionalizing the expectations for project development across both VDOT and local projects to ensure our financial resources are fully leveraged. And earlier to Mr. Griffin's comment about consequences, yes, we may look at reallocating funding, deallocation of funds, or even project cancellations, which we, as Mr. Griffin commented on earlier, we have done that in the past. So, sir, that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher, and I want to just really reinforce the point you're making here. What we're saying right now is the commissioners implemented this concept to address shortcomings in the dashboard. And that's not to say the dashboard doesn't have lots of value. It clearly does. It missed two things, though, right? Like what happens when something becomes red, to the point that Mr. Thrasher noted, what we measure is what happens, and once it was red, it was bad, and you took the hit and you kind of like moved on. That's not good, clearly, and we're addressing that. I think the other thing is it's numbers and not values, as the commissioner noted several times there. What we are asking is we want to systemically, weave the concept of the portfolio and forward-looking expectations on a proactive basis throughout our programs. So looking at smart scale projects. When you get those funds, what are our kind of expectations for your spend rate and your advancement of this project? If you get revenue sharing funds, what are our expectations for the time frame to which you'll advance that? I want to be clear, this isn't something we're going to try and move forward without a lot of input and engagement, and not all projects will be the same because they award money in different years, they award money to different types of projects, right? And so there will be flexibility and not a one-size-fits-all type of construct there. But what we are asking and will be asking this board to do is in the coming months to consider a policy, or updates to an existing policy, to weave these forward-looking expectations into the programs that we have. And this last bullet here is like there's the carrot of we're going to work with you. And then we also think it's important, though, that we also put in place the stick. Now, there needs to be cure periods, right, and other things of that nature that we'll get into more in the future. But we can't be in a circumstance where we have projects and dollars and tax dollars that we've collected that we've been tasked to put to use that aren't advancing. And so we need to help. We need to provide expectations. We need to allow for the opportunity to fix, because occasionally things do happen. But if after all of those things have taken place, we are still in the circumstance where something is moving forward, we also need to put in place, pulling back those funds and redeploying them somewhere else where they can be put to use for the Commonwealth. This is going to require a lot of discussion. I suspect you're going to get a fair number of phone calls as we start to kind of discuss that. But I think as this presentation demonstrates, when we do this, we can drive outcomes. So the goal here is never to utilize those consequences, but to put in place expectations and the support to allow us to deliver the projects. And so we just really think this is, I think, again, commend the commissioner and all of his team for what they've done here. And I think what we can do as a board moving forward is to put this in systemically throughout the program and manage that both with our district folks and also our local folks who are delivering projects. So we'll be coming back probably in September or October with kind of an initial concept. I want to be clear, we're going to need to let that air a little bit so folks can weigh in on it, because I'm sure there will be things where someone may bring up an issue we maybe should take into account. But we do want to have the board take some action sometime in the coming months to update this policy. And so with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions from Mr. Thrasher or the commissioner.
Sorry, I just briefly put this in historical context, and you can correct me if I've got this wrong. My understanding is Commissioner Suquette that initially put the dashboard in place.
2004.
So to help the board understand where we were then and where we are now, when he sat down as a new commissioner and asked, how are we doing in terms of on-time and on-budget delivery, he was told, according to the latest revisions, every project is on time and on budget. According to the latest revision.
Which was not true. say that quiet part out loud.
Yes, but to come from that to this, where you have a really sophisticated, data-driven, transparent, and the one question I had coming to this meeting is, why are we focusing on numbers and not value? And now we're focusing on value. I think as Virginians, we can be very proud of what our department has done and what VDOT has done in developing this tool, and not only developing it, but using it, and not allowing it to become politicized. I've watched others who have tools, and their tools, the goalposts move, and all of a sudden every year is better, or year on year on year on year. But just kudos to the department for just putting together a first-rate measurement tool for how well we're doing and allowing it to be so transparent.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Folks?
From what I've been hearing, it seems to me there are just no consequences for localities that are over budget and behind schedule, and that at some point in time, they need to be held accountable. And is it possible, do we have the authority to cancel projects that are the one that the commissioner described, 13 years on the books? I don't understand why we allow them to keep it on the books. If they're not doing anything in 13 years, are they going to ever do anything? And given inflation, as you pointed out, I mean, there's no way they can be on budget.
So, Mr. Folks, I think that is a very fair question. What I would note is, I think it's both, they're both VDOT and local projects that are kind of represented in that there. So this is, as Mr. Davis said earlier, this is a shared partnership in delivering these projects, and so it's both locals and VDOTs. I think we have the ability to do the things that you've outlined. I think what we haven't done, which then makes it hard to exercise the authority that this board has, is we haven't set expectations. And so I think the biggest part of the change that we're asking for in the development policy will be how we set those expectations and how they vary by program, because again, programs are different in terms of when they allocate funds and other things. And once we've been clear with expectations and clear about the support you get and, you know, the opportunities to cure, I think then that will make it, it will enhance the board's ability to exercise the authority it does have in terms of reallocating funds. I think today, because we're not clear with our expectations, people can, and rightly so, be like, why me? Why are you picking on, you know, why aren't you picking Mr. Hutchinson or Dr. Schul? They're both late too, and heck, I think Dr. Schul's later than me. And like, because we haven't been clear on the expectations, people can say those things. And so I think what we're kind of recognizing is that we have more homework to do to enable, I think, this board to more fully exercise its authority in those types of circumstances. So I agree completely with kind of the sentiment that you're making, and that's what we're kind of driving at here. And this, look, this has been a continual stage of enhancement. So, you know, Mr. Gribben went back to like just the creation of the dashboard, which was just awareness, right, of where we were. Another just, I think, kind of sea change that we implemented, God, I don't remember now, it was 2017, I think, we put in place the requirement that to be added to the 6-year program, we were gonna fully fund projects. That wildly changed our ability to kind of be clear about delivery, right? Because before that, if you had like 3 to 4 phases of a project and you got full funding for design and partial funding for right-of-way, well, when are you supposed to deliver? And what is that project going to cost when you do get the construction money? Because you never knew when you were actually going to get enough resources to deliver a project. And so that huge sea change we made in 2017 of saying we're only going to add projects to the program from our major programs if they're fully funded made it so that the commissioner and his team could say, okay, you have everything you need. Now let's set a real schedule. Because before the schedule, if you only have part of your money, whatever schedule you have is not real because you never know when the next dollar is coming. And that one, you know, create a circumstance where people would get upset with the department or their local partners for saying, well, this project now cost twice as much. And the answer sometimes is like, well, it took you 15 years longer than expected to give me the money. The other side of that coin is that it kind of let the department and locals off the hook when sometimes maybe they could have done better, but they could hide behind the fact that money was moving about. And so now when you're fully funded, there's no room, those excuses don't work anymore because the dollars are there to deliver that project. And so we're kind of building on those changes that have been put in place over, at this point, 20-some years. And I think where you're hitting, sir, is where we want to go. And I think it's the next kind of logical stage to make sure, again, we can show folks we're putting these dollars to use wisely and getting the results, more importantly. Mr. Stanton?
I attend as many local meetings with the district engineer and the localities as I can, and there are a lot of them. But the dashboard that the commissioners put together that forces the localities to look at their performance has really worked. So I kind of disagree that localities don't understand or don't have any knowledge that they are falling behind, because I think with what the commissioner put together, they know exactly now where they are. And some of the localities in my district have faced loss of money, loss of projects simply because they were so far behind. And it's something that we need to keep doing because they got to, you just can't have that money sitting there and sitting there and sitting there for years and years and years and inflation just eating it up. So, I mean, localities really need to meet the expectation of the commissioner and this board about what's going on in their areas. I think they do know it, so I think we got to keep the push going.
That's very fair, Mr. I do think they know. What I want to make sure they all can say, and I guess the inverse is also cannot say, is that they didn't understand how we would respond to them being in that circumstance. And so I think there is some ambiguity in that second part, but I think it is fair to say they do know when they're falling behind. And I guess the clarity we want to provide then is what we are going to do when that happens. So that I think it's kind of consistent across the state among different districts and localities. Ms. Dunlap?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm curious as to how the dashboard and the portfolio take into consideration adjustments and priorities based on a natural disaster in a community where a road is wiped out and maybe the sidewalk becomes less important than repairing the road, or the changes in local government officials that happen much more often than changes in state government officials.
Mr. Secretary, Ms. Dunlop, with regard to during a natural disaster emergency situations, those are all funded outside of the construction program. Now, priorities within at least the department would continue to separate those priorities and drive forward the construction program. We recognize that the localities may have the same person wearing multiple hats needing to deliver. Our expectations continue to say that you need to deliver both on time and on budget. And yes, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, but some of the larger municipalities or localities do have a maintenance side that would focus on those emergency situations, contractor, consultant help as well. But our expectations are going to be our expectations on the delivery. Now, as far as the change in political winds within a locality and changing priorities at that point, this is one of the reasons why we need to be setting those expectations very clearly, that once you put a pin in it and have a fully funded project, and that's a priority, then you need to deliver that project on time and on budget within that set expectation without starting and stopping. Otherwise, what we'll find ourselves into, and we had that with the city of Charlottesville, that their priorities had changed and needed to revisit and cancel some of those projects. But canceling them are equally as effective as delivering them. I'd rather cancel a project early, repurpose that money in a very timely manner, and not fight the inflation that was caused. But it also comes with the right sizing the program and not over leveraging yourself on, I can do it, and not be able to deliver it.
When Commissioner, some of the political winds, and Mr. Ventura, I saw you raise your hand there. I would also say what we have also tried to do, and again, try does not mean that's always what happens, is, when we pick projects, part of the reason we're fully funding them is at that point that the policy decision was made and it should be advanced. So again, I don't expect that we are going to revisit things that happened over the previous 4 years, just as in the previous 4 years, they didn't revisit all the things that happened in the 4 years that happened before that. When we were partially funding projects, that happened all the time. And the reason it could happen is, well, it's not fully funded. Like what's 20% of the project budget in year 4 of the 6-year program mean? The truth is it didn't really mean anything. And so now that we're fully funding projects, we're hopefully kind of moving away from that, which doesn't mean it won't happen at times, but my hope, Ms. Dunlop, is we reduce those types of circumstances even when a local kind of board turns over, and hopefully we're not picking anything that's of a level of controversy that it's going to be like subject to that type of thing. I'm certain now that I've said that that will happen at least once, right? So I just want to be clear about the exception to the rule, but I would hope as a rule, like a pothole doesn't have party affiliation or doesn't have, one representative versus another. It's just a problem we're trying to fix. And so I hope most of the things we do kind of fall into that framework. And I also hope by the full funding of projects that we're kind of creating the certainty for those local businesses and residents that something will be delivered, recognizing the exceptions always kind of will happen. But I hope the rule is that we minimize those types of circumstances. Commissioner, and then Mr.
Secretary.
1 second, Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary, a lot of the questions have focused on localities. I want to reiterate one thing. We are, or I am holding VDOT to the same expectations that are being given. So I don't want to create a us versus them situation. That is not what this conversation is about. It's setting expectations on delivery of what's contained in the 6-year improvement program, and not by individual, whether it's a locality versus a VDOT system. We are holding our district engineers accountable for the delivery. The chief engineer, why he's standing in front of this board right now is because he is responsible for the delivery of the 6-year improvement program as a whole. So VDOT is being held to the same expectations. Now, we have the control to be able to put this into place right now. So I've taken advantage of that opportunity, and so we're leading that charge and holding our group accountable for the expectations on portfolio. I'd like to see that transcended through all of the programs that we have within the 6-year improvement program. So VDOT as a whole, 6-year improvement program as a whole is where what we're talking about, just not the localities in the question.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a very fair point. We're going to go to Mr. Minshew and then Dr. Smoot.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Commissioner, it's kind of a follow-up to points raised by Mr. Folks and Mr. Stant. When a project kind of goes into a default posture, do we have any one primal cause? In other words, if it's a force majeure thing, 100-year flood, bad soils, limestone sinkhole, I get it. But if you change the project to accommodate the HOA that recently expressed some concern, I've got a different view on that. So I'm just curious on causation. Is it more of like betterments or change orders or accommodating new interests that have come up, or something that's more, unexpected?
So, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Minshew, what has experienced is I've gone through the state, through each of our meetings with the district engineers and our design staff. There is not one single pinpoint issue that can be identified. What we learned in part of this memo is making timely decisions. What we found was that when a project gets put in the 6-year plan, you have a budget. The estimate turns into a budget. That's your budget, now designed within that budget. There are decisions that are made to be able to stay within that budget and still deliver the project. What we found was a decision wasn't being made in a timely manner, needed to go to a locality for discussion, then it went to the Board of Supervisors, back to the engineer tried something, it didn't work. What this all means is, and the chief engineer said, reducing the amount of churn. It's the fact of the matter of making timely decisions, and maybe a cost increase is necessary to be able to accomplish it. So every project in itself has a story, and that story is different. Now, there's some commonalities that are there, but what it boils down to is making timely decisions.
Dr. Smoot?
Secretary, this is a place where I think CTB board members can be particularly helpful selectively in working with a district engineer and going to localities. And I have found that, somewhat to my surprise, that these visits were really appreciated, because it helped the people in the localities who are responsible for projects to get the resources, like from the Board of Supervisors or the City Council, whatever it might be able to support and execute these projects. So now I think we need to be careful how we do that, but there is an opportunity there to be of service to those in the localities who are responsible, along with VDOT, for getting these projects done.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Thrasher? Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. thank you, Mr. Birch, as well, and thank you to the VDOT representative. It was very helpful. From my experience in the Fredericksburg region, which, no surprise, I'm sure to anyone sitting at this table, is busting at the seams in growth. Kalahari, VA clinic, or sort of the epicenter, if you will, for new data center investment. And I deal with the local level quite a bit in what I do, and I deal with VDOT quite a bit with what I do. And my view of this and what I see is extraordinary cooperation between the local jurisdictions and VDOT to address this extraordinary growth that's happening on the I-95 corridor, which is having an impact on everything on the I-95 corridor, quite honestly. But what I'm seeing is perhaps lessons learned from other jurisdictions in the Fredericksburg region. What I'm seeing is complete engagement at the Fredericksburg district level, at the local level. What I'm also seeing is cooperation between the private developers and the local jurisdiction and VDOT. Not always in agreement, but certainly a coordination of getting something done. Now, we'd like to have more resources, I assure you that. We'd like to have a lot more resources because I think, and I'm sure you all think the same of your districts, that Fredericksburg is a really important economic development component to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and a growing one. But my experience in dealing with VDOT and the district office at VDOT in Fredericksburg and also with the local jurisdictions is a unique cooperation. Not perfect, but certainly a unique one, and I want to compliment VDOT and Mr. Birch on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Last call. Well, thank you, Mr. Thrasher.
Thank you, sir.
And next we have Mr. Short giving an update on the revenue sharing program. For our new members of the board, you're getting part 2 of a 2-part presentation. We did put part 1 in the deck there as a kind of an appendix, and I'm sure Mr. Short and his team will be available if you have any kind of questions there. But I just want to flag, when you hear us talk about last month, you were getting the second half or the second part of a set of policy recommendations, the first part of which we've already gone through at the previous month. Mr. Short.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. And I would first just kind of start off with, if you loved that last conversation, you'll really, really love this one, right? So, that said, just as by way of introduction, I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Local Assistance Division at VDOT, and just because of the previous presentation and the conversation about local partnerships, want to let you know that our division has the privilege of serving in that role to equip, train, and empower our local partners in the delivery of their transportation priorities and the priorities of the Commonwealth. And so I just wanted to sort of share that as an introduction, particularly for our new members. Mr. Secretary, members of the board, I'm here as an additional presentation for the revenue sharing program to follow up with that discussion that I provided in June. For those that would like a reference, as mentioned, the handouts are included as an appendix in your presentation for the presentation today. That includes an overview of the revenue sharing program as well as highlights from that June presentation. Today's presentation is informational. There is no board action that we're looking for today, but it's really continuing to frame the discussion around the potential for future action. As I mentioned, this presentation is a follow-up from the June presentation that I gave, and some key highlights, again, are included in your handout. As we walk through the presentation, I'll review the current project development expectations, the current state of the revenue sharing program, and some recommendations to update the policy. Our overarching goal is to ensure the revenue sharing projects are advancing to for timely benefits to the traveling public. So this slide does a really good job of summarizing the limitations of the existing revenue sharing project delivery expectations, which is drawn exclusively from state code. That is that all projects must be initiated within 1 year of allocation, and if they aren't by year 2, only then are they subject to deallocation. So we are deallocating projects according to these durations, but we have to wait until the conclusion of the second year with no activity on the project before we can deallocate. Now, we just heard from the chief engineer during his presentation about the VDOT project delivery expectations, and to be clear, revenue sharing projects are not advancing timely when compared to our expectations. Time is money. Well, we've all heard that before. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to share some project delivery details related to time specifically. And this builds upon what you heard or read about in the June presentation about fully funding projects. Without fully funding projects at inception, projects can linger before they're started, which doesn't aid in achieving these project delivery expectations. For revenue sharing specifically, we're looking to give ourselves additional milestones throughout a project's development when we can do a pulse check and advance deallocation if warranted and when warranted, rather than waiting for the second year. Finding that the current minimum requirement has been met, but that the project is no closer to delivering than it is when it received funding. So the revenue sharing portfolio shows a clear pattern. Too many projects remain in the program far longer than intended. Delivery durations vary dramatically, both for revenue sharing only funded projects and those with multi-fund sources. And this inconsistency is driving program inefficiency, and as the commissioner mentioned, perhaps more troubling is eroding the buying power of the dollar. Over the next couple of slides, I'll go into more detail about where these delays are occurring. Across all revenue sharing projects, delivery timeframes range from just a few months to over 14 years to reach construction. This spread underscores a system issue. Without stronger guardrails and full funding at inception, project timelines expand well beyond what we expect and what can be sustained. As reference, Tier 1 projects are smaller. They're low-risk projects that have a total construction cost of less than $15 million, and a construction-only Tier 1 project can move in just a matter of months. But when design and right-of-way are added, delivery could balloon to 9 to 11 years, showing how even the modest dollar value projects can actually stagnate. Tier 2 projects, by comparison, are complex. They are high risk and require strict oversight and have a construction value of greater than $15 million. These projects can be construction only or include design and right-of-way phases. And when we shift to Tier 2, we see these projects ranging from roughly a year to 14 years, as I mentioned, in delivery, becoming our longest running commitments. Every year that a project lingers, the purchasing power of the revenue sharing dollar erodes, which means a project and the traveling public absorbs the loss twice. First, through the delay, and then again through the diminished value of the allocation that requires only an increased investment to cover that loss. If a project is stalled and is eventually canceled, then the funds we reclaim no longer buy what they would have or could have when the project was first awarded, which again underscores the need for a deallocation process that is more responsive to rather than waiting until the end of the second year for deallocation. So I've got some illustrations here for you. The first is, these are what are referred to as box and whisker plots, and each represents the 4 different kind of categories of project delivery. 1, Tier 1 in the orange, blue, Tier 1, no right-of-way, green, no with right-of-way for Tier 1, and then Tier 2. So starting to left to right, in Tier 1 construction only, and again, this is for revenue sharing projects only, with only revenue sharing funds. For Tier 1 construction only, in orange, those projects have the shortest and most consistent durations to deliver. As you can see, the box is very, very small, meaning that there is very low variability between the project duration, and the median sits under 1 year. The whiskers, the lines above, are very short, hardly even detectable in the graphic. And there are very few outliers for duration. And the blue, under Tier 1 for no right-of-way, these projects have longer and more variable durations than what we saw with the construction-only projects. The median sits around 2 years, with a moderate spread across the middle half of the project data. There are several outliers, as you can see on the top there, that expend longer at the longer end of the durations, which shows that some projects are taking significantly longer to deliver. On Tier 1 with right-of-way, those shown in green, you can see that the density, again, of those outliers are starting to increase. It adds time and variability. The median is around 3 to 4 years, with numerous outliers showing that the project with right-of-way can extend well beyond that of typical durations. And then lastly, the Tier 2 projects, those in purple, those projects take the longest overall and show the highest variability. The median is roughly around 5 years, and the tall box indicates a broad range of delivery durations. The whiskers and frequent outliers extend even further, with some projects taking 12 to 14 years or longer to deliver. And just for the convenience to help kind of re-support the chief engineer's comments in the previous presentation, the yellow boxes here overlay those VDOT delivery expectations that he mentioned and that are included in the project delivery portfolio memo that are in your packets. So this visualization pivots from just one funding source of revenue sharing, but now includes multi-funds. So those projects that receive multi-funds, they're represented.
Mr. Short, just to clarify, you mean funding for multiple programs?
Multiple
Okay, so this could
programs.
be smart scale and revenue sharing, and maybe some MPO type funding or other things, but more than just revenue
But
sharing.
includes revenue sharing.
Yes.
Yes, so you could have a project, a round one smart scale project that receives supplemental revenue sharing. Those projects are indicated on these graphs. Thank you for that. For Tier 1 construction in orange, you can see that it's very similar in consistency to delivery timeframes as the previous slide. There are no long duration outliers, reinforces that these projects are quick and predictable with delivery timelines under 1 year. For Tier 1 with no right-of-way in blue, the general pattern stays the same, with the median about 2 years with moderate variability and very few outliers overall. For Tier 1 with right-of-way in green, the median is around 3 to 4 years, and these projects still carry substantially longer durations, but with less variability on the multi-funded projects than on revenue sharing alone. And then lastly, for Tier 2 in purple, we're again seeing the longest and most variable project delivery durations. The median here is slightly longer at around 6 years with more consistently longer durations, and there are extreme outliers in both the high and low ends, with some projects extending beyond 14 years. And again, I've included the yellow markers to support the chief engineer's comments in the previous slide. So over the next month, I just wanted to, we have a survey that's been released, and I think I'll mention that here in a moment as well, but we have a survey that's been released to our local partners. Over the next month, we'll be working with our district staff and partners and our localities to better understand the circumstances behind those outliers. In fact, we've already begun looking deeply at the individual projects. It becomes complicated, particularly in this scenario, when many of the projects enjoy funding from multiple programs. So to summarize today's Part 2 presentation of the program, we'll come back with a policy and updated guidance for review that includes that all project applications are recommended to be supported by a technical memorandum or a regional local study. And the best way to summarize this is that the recommendation reinforces the concept that a project well planned is a project well executed. We will further define initiation and a project that is what's required within the 1-2 year timeframes as set forth in code. We'll propose project development metrics that would apply to all projects to be incorporated in the revenue sharing and other funding programs, as the Secretary mentioned. And the proposed changes for revenue sharing that you heard about today, when coupled with full funding proposal discussed at the June meeting, would support our local partners in beginning their projects faster and being better positioned to advance and to follow reasonable delivery deadlines. So the next steps for consideration, I mentioned we've got that survey live. We've socialized that with over 300 of our local partners and are already receiving some feedback. We will continue stakeholder engagement through August, as well as conducting a detailed review, again, of this current state of the revenue sharing projects with each locality. We'll be focusing this effort on some of those outliers that you saw in the earlier box and whisker plots, looking at projects that are exceeding reasonable durations and understanding causes for delay and where we can help mitigate those issues. In September, you'll hear about delivery expectations for the entire program, not just revenue sharing. And then afterward, in October thereabout, we'll bring a resolution to adopt the revenue sharing specific policy changes with a goal of implementing those for the spring 2027 application window. So with that, if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Short and Mr. Davis, really quick before we go there. So just as a reminder, guys, last month we talked about how we actually allocate the money and changing, how we pick projects to a certain degree to try and fully fund more projects. We just talked about the importance of that at the last meeting. So again, just for new board members, please do look at that appendix because you will probably hear from some local governments there because we are recommending changes in who gets money and how we make those decisions. I think the second part here that Mr. Short, and we really wanted to just talk specifically about revenue sharing, the delivery has always been a challenge in the revenue sharing program. There's a variety of reasons for that, and some of them are unique to the revenue sharing program. But just to to tell a story is, in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit and we had real uncertainty in our revenue estimates, this program had the largest kind of percentage balance of funds relative to what had been awarded. We actually were able to borrow, I think is the correct term, around $490-some million from previous allocations in this program to ensure our other projects could be ongoing because we had projects with previous allocations that weren't moving up to speed. Those funds were repaid, so all those projects were kind of kept whole, but it's just demonstrating kind of delivery challenges that we had in the past with this program. I think as the charts Mr. Short showed, we still have those challenges, in this program, but it's not just this program, right? And so we have it across the 6-year program as Mr. Thrasher's kind of presentation noted. So we intentionally talked about this in June and July because this is a very popular program with local governments. I expect you will get comments over the summer. We wanted to make sure that when we had the gap in meetings between now and September, that locals had sufficient opportunity provide feedback on what we're talking about here so that we can make an informed decision. It's also why Mr. Short and his team are doing this survey. No one should be caught off guard that we are talking about changes to these policies. We're doing our best to reach out to folks. And again, if you find someone who we've missed, let us know and we'll clearly engage them as well kind of in that process. But I just wanted to highlight this particular program has been uniquely challenging on kind of the delivery side for a long time, and some of that is about how it's structured, but it's not just this program. Mr. Davis.
Appreciate the comments on the clarity there about the program itself, and it is super important to the rural locality. I would just stress that if we do make changes to this program and how it's designed, excuse me, and how it functions, that we'd be mindful of how it could affect the rural localities and just make sure that we're affecting all localities in an equal fashion. And we wouldn't want to inadvertently create an opportunity where a rural locality is precluded. I do look at the considerations for the slide 7, considerations for meeting project delivery and expectations. It says recommended, not required on memorandum or regional local study. And there may be instances where rural localities are not able to muster up that type of resource to get in front of this program. And we certainly wouldn't want from getting access by throwing down some hurdles. But that's my only point. It's vitally important. I have heard from a couple localities that this is very, very important to them and how they go about their much needed projects getting done in their area. So that's really my only comment. So thank you.
That's very fair, Mr. Davis. And maybe what we can make sure is we also talk about how VDOT can maybe help and work with some of those local partners, particularly in the more rural areas, to assist with any of those types of things. So very fair point, and appreciate you raising that. I also meant to mention, I just forgot, the initiation thing, just to give you a quick example of what Mr. Short is getting at. So there is a requirement in the policy today that you initiate a project within a certain number of years of receiving the allocation. I'm not going to name any names, but we do have folks who initiate by having a meeting about the project, and then we get a bill we've initiated the project, and then not much happens for a while after that. I think that maybe meets the letter of what the current policy is. I'm going to go out on a very thick limb and say it doesn't meet the intent, right? And so those are some of the things, initiate actually means start the work and to kind of move forward, not to kind of just send in the first bill to the project. And so there's a number of things where I think we need to kind of do a little bit of a better job in setting, again, our expectations to our, partners that we're working with about what we're looking for there. And then I think, Mr. Short, I just ask that you kind of give some consideration to what Mr. Davis flagged and think about how, as the department, we can make sure we're not putting folks in that position where we're locking them out of the program, because that certainly is not the intent, but let's make sure that's not the effect as well. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Short? Sure. Next, we have a presentation from Ms. Pryor and Mr. Trogdon about the revised FY27 CTF budget.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. For the new board members, I will tell you that normally you will see me once a year to adopt a budget. Unlike last year, we broke a record and adopted 3 budgets. I apologize, but I'm coming back to you already with a revised fiscal year 27 budget. But it's pretty straightforward.
Ms. Pryor, just to remind you, I think Mr. Trogdon's actually not here, and you'll be doing both the VDOT and
It's just
DRB.
me.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
what I
got
thought.
me. Yes. So the governor's draft budget was released in December of 2025. The final Commonwealth Transportation Fund budgets, DRPT's budget, and VDOT's budget were adopted in June, just this past month. The final 6-year improvement program was also adopted in June. However, the final biennial budget was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor on June 30th. There are some items in that budget that we need to modify our existing budget and DRPT's 6-year program to incorporate. So we'll be asking for your action and approval tomorrow to approve those revised budgets and program. The approved state budget includes 3 items that we had not anticipated in the draft in our work up to June. The first, item 433-1C, provides $300,000 of general fund allocations to support the work of a committee established for a 1-year study looking at the status of public transit in Hampton Roads and options for the future. A second item provides $19 million in general fund allocations for a one-time transit capital investments. The third item provides $153 million in general fund allocations for the state share of the increased operating support for WMATA over the 2-year biennium. Importantly, there were no changes to state revenues, and there are no changes to VDOT's budget or highway construction portion of the 6-year program. The slide just shows the Commonwealth Transportation Fund estimated revenues. If you look at the far right column, that's where you should focus. You will see that there is a change in the general fund revenues to the tune of $172.3 million. That is the sum of those 3 items I just explained to you. This chart just shows where those allocations land in terms of the budget and program. $19.3 million land within public transportation, and the other $153, of course, is going to WMATA for operating support. This slide just shows kind of as a percentage where the program and where the programs break out. The CTF revenues now total $10.4 billion, up to the tune of $172 million over the previously approved budget and program. All of these percentages remain relatively the same. The funding for DRPT does increase slightly from the 9.7 it was, or sorry, 10.2 before to 11.2% of the budget. So as I mentioned at the onset, tomorrow I'll be coming to you with a recommendation to approve the addition of these general fund allocations to the CTF budget and to DRPT's budget, as well as DRPT's portion of the 6-year improvement program. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Are there any questions for Ms. Pryor? Okay, and I want to note we will get an update around some policy and other items included in the final budget later from Mr. Hutchinson. So just, these are the financials and the numbers, but we'll talk about some of the other policy items in due course. And Ms. Pryor, I believe you're actually still with us.
This presentation is an update for you on the I-81 corridor TIFIA loans. I'll get into a little bit of background for the new members on the I-81 corridor program, our overall financial model and debt profile, and then get into details on what I'll be bringing to you for action. That action will be requested in September. As a bit of background, the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program and Fund were created in 2019. It provided new transportation revenues to support the interstate highways and specifically I-81. Then again in 2020, additional legislation was approved that authorized the issuance of bonds with an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $1 billion for the I-81 program. It also reduced the geographic footprint for the collection of those regional fuels tax revenues and provided specific funding for interstates through the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, a portion of which is dedicated to the I-81 program. As we sit here in the Bristol District, many of you drove a considerable portion of the I-81 corridor to get here. This is a 325-mile-long corridor. It crosses 3 VDOT districts, 13 counties, and 10 cities. The program consists of both operational improvements as well as capital improvements. The capital improvements generally consist of widenings, acceleration, deceleration lanes, curve improvements, truck climbing lanes, shoulder widenings, and that sort of thing. As of June, we've had very strong program-wide progress. 43 of the capital improvement projects are complete, 14 are under construction. You may have driven through some of those work zones. The 65 capital projects are shown below by district as well as the status that they're in. You can see again that many of them are already complete. In terms of the funding sources and structure for the I-81 program, there's dedicated funding for the program. It's deposited into the I-81 Corridor Improvement Fund. It includes 2 sources. The first is a regional fuels tax along the I-81 corridor. The second is the I-81 share of statewide revenues from the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. The regional fuels tax, beginning in 2019, imposed a 2.1% gas tax or tax on gasoline and diesel sold by a distributor to a retail dealer. That changed in 2020. It was changed to a per gallon rate, and it's subject to annual CPI adjustment. The regional fuels tax revenue, it may be leveraged for debt service as well as pay-as-you-go allocations to support project delivery. Allocations from the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program are provided to I-95, I-64, I-81, and another broader category of other interstates. I-81 receives its share of the IOEP based on its ratio of vehicle miles traveled on I-81 by truck vehicle class 6 or higher to total vehicle miles traveled on the interstate. That funding is intended to provide pay-as-you-go allocations to support project delivery. The slide just shows the performance. As you can see, both sources of funding perform quite well. They continue to grow. Cumulative project expenditures from the fund are about $510 million. The fund balance is currently about $743 million. That fund balance does include a little bit of revenue that is from the general fund and from some federal earmarks that have been allocated to the program as well. This slide just attempts to show how the program is advancing across using the multiple sources of funding, including IOEP, regional fuels tax, and the multi-lien debt structure that we have implemented for the I-81 corridor. So as I mentioned, we have a multi-lien debt structure that we have set up for the I-81 corridor. It's a strategic multi-year plan. We set out at the very beginning of the program intentionally to deliver the program using debt to help accelerate the delivery of the projects using both a blend of debt as well as pay-go allocations. We have issued municipal bonds. We also have a pretty significant contribution to the program from Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act loans called TIFIA loans. We have a couple of those loans already under our belt. What I'm bringing to you today is the next set of loans we'll be entering into. The way we've set this program up.
Ms. Pryor?
Yes.
Really quickly, particularly for new members, could you just say a little bit more about TIFIA loans, where they are, why that exists, and how it's different than a normal loan?
Yes. TIFIA loans are housed within the Build America Bureau at the federal level. You can get loans that are rural loans that are targeted for rural parts of the state, or regular loans. I have a little bit more detail later in here, but the rural loans are very advantageous as you can get them at half of the regular Treasury rate. So it's very advantageous to proceed with these loans. The I-81 corridor takes great advantage of the rural TIFIA loans. We also have built in application for regular TIFIA loans as well, which are much larger. The TIFIA program does allow you to capitalize interest, so you don't start paying debt service until after construction, so it allows you to have more pay-go money up front to then advance other projects. So what this has allowed us to do is essentially start all the capital improvement projects rather than wait to finish one to start the next one. So the way we've set the program up allows us to have consistent assumptions regarding the flow of the funds through the IOEP and the regional fuels tax, consistent credit features, and loan structure. The I-81 regional fuels tax revenues will support all of the existing debt as well as the planned debt. The I-81 debt does not impact the debt capacity of the Commonwealth. Much of the board's debt is backed by a tax revenue stream, and then by the TTF, the Transportation Trust Fund, and then by any other source deemed by the General Assembly necessary. The I-81 program is backed by the regional fuels tax revenue, so it is outside of the debt capacity assumptions for the Commonwealth. This is similar to how bond programs are set up and utilized by NVTA, as well as HR TAC and Hampton Roads. The TIFIA loan structure allows us to maximize the program's benefits, as I mentioned previously. The repayment term can be 35 years after substantial completion of the project, has a very flexible payment structure with a draw period of up to a year past substantial completion of the project. That is how we've set up the I-81 program, to draw down the loans after completion of the work. The TIFIA program allows VDOT to advance multiple capital improvement projects using that debt financing. As I mentioned before, the rural TIFIA loan program allows financing of up to 49% of federally eligible costs at 1/2 of the 30-year U.S. Treasury rate. There's a maximum federal eligible cost of $100 million for rural loans, so we could get a loan for half of that, essentially. And these loans, as you can imagine, are highly competitive across the nation. In 2021, we issued municipal bonds for the I-81 program, as you can see in the chart at the bottom, $102 million of bonds. In 2022, we entered into 2 TIFIA loans. One was a rural TIFIA loan. Those projects are all complete, and we have drawn down that loan. The 2022 regular loan project, we do estimate to be complete by the end of this calendar year, and we do plan to draw down that as well. We are currently developing applications for 4 rural TIFIA loans in 2026. We do anticipate closing 2 of those loans in September, with the other 2 coming soon behind. Because the federal fiscal year ends in September, we're able to get 2 on this side of the fiscal year and anticipate the other 2 early in the next fiscal year. So the chart, you can see the previously issued bonds, the previously acquired loans, both rural and regular, the 2026 loans that we are applying for now, as well as future financing, future series of loans that we plan into the future to support the program. The planned 4 loans are shown in the chart at the bottom of the slide. These project bundles comprise 14 projects procured under 9 separate contracts. In many cases, you may be aware, we will put multiple projects on a single contract just for efficiency and delivery and procurement. So that's why we have 9 contracts, 14 projects, totaling about $361 million in project costs. These will be on a senior lien on parity with the existing 2022 rural TIFIA loan and the 2021 bonds. This chart shows the 14 projects and the 9 different contract packages that they're in. Just for your information, in case you were interested which projects we're talking about, they're all either underway or nearly complete at this point. In terms of the loan structure, very consistent with the previous TIFIA loan, the previous rural TIFIA loans we have. These will be senior lien loans at 1/2 the 30-year Treasury rate. The 2026 rural TIFIA loans are expected to be the last funding source to be drawn, as I mentioned, so these projects, again, are largely complete. We anticipate substantially level debt service with the maximum annual debt service of the existing debt plus these new loans estimated at $17.6 million. Principal payments will start promptly after substantial completion. The TIFIA loans allow capitalized interest, so we will only during the loan's disbursement period. So once we draw the loan, we'll start paying that interest and principal. There's no debt service reserve fund requirement for this senior lien debt. The final maturity is expected in 34 years, which will be 34 years after the substantial completion date of the last project. Again, the 2026 rural projects use the last individual project in the bundle, the last completion date to set that start time for the debt service payments. Interest payments on TIFIA loans are paid semi-annually in November and May, and the principal is paid once a year in May. In terms of the preliminary schedule, we've been working closely with the Build America Bureau. We've been working through our creditworthiness review and processing due diligence questions, negotiating the terms of the loan and reviewing the draft. We meet with them weekly. We have a very good partnership with them. We can expect to continue to advance these. Today I'm presenting to you the plan of finance. We do expect to receive an invitation to submit our loan applications shortly. So I'm bringing to you an action item in September to give us authorization to submit that loan application. I will then go to the Treasury Board and request similar approval. And then the governor will be asked for approval in September, and then we expect to close by the end of the federal fiscal year, by the end of September. My last slide, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Are there any questions? Ms. Dunlap, and then Dr. Smoot.
Thank you, Secretary. Great presentation. I'm just curious, the TIFIA loan option for rural, does it include, forgive me if I should know the answer to this, dealing with the alternative routes if I-81 sections have to be closed?
If maintenance of traffic is required during the construction period of a project on I-81, that is one of these capital improvement projects that would be part of that project cost.
How about in the future if there's just an accident on I-81 which requires moving traffic to an alternative route which might not be in the greatest condition right now?
Ms. Pryor, Ms. Donovan, I think the commissioner, they're baked into the 81 corridor program as a whole, but not being funded through the TIFIA loan is a host of upgrades to parallel routes to help improve our detour capabilities. One of the things when we were developing the 81 corridor program that we heard on repeat, and I know, Dr. Smoot, we are going to keep working on it because there's still times where folks get stuck, is upgrades to those parallel facilities so that when the road closes and we have to divert folks, we're able to modify how the parallel routes work so that we can, in a very technical term, flush through the interstate traffic to get around kind of that one section where maybe the interstate is closed. And so I think, for example, yesterday when we were talking with the Bristol MPO, I know the city of Bristol staff has actually taken over traffic lights on 11 where it's parallel to 81 for purposes of actually being able to help with that type of work. Ironically, we put this in place as soon as the bill was passed with some kind of funding, and I actually was able to take advantage of that on the way to the bill signing, where a tractor trailer flipped over. I think actually it was 4 cars in front of me, and I was able to get to the exit and get off, and we had flaggers out there because we hadn't yet been able to update those signals. And in some places, we're still gonna need flaggers to help push the traffic kind of through and direct it so that those local roads and those communities in turn don't become completely overwhelmed. But that's something the corridor fund is gonna keep paying for, but it's not gonna be covered by the TIFIA loans. But it is into the program, and I think the question we probably need to keep asking into the future is, we had an initial set of enhancements we made with the first program. As travel patterns change, we may need to identify new locations where we need to do it that we didn't do it that first go-around.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Dr. Smoot?
Yes, so a TIFIA loan is a loan to the Commonwealth by the federal government, right?
Yes.
So there is no bond or debt instrument that the commercial market or individuals would buy.
Correct.
Okay, so this is a pure, clean loan situation. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Smith, just to add, so this is a subsidized borrowing program. So in the federal transportation reauthorization, there's dollars in the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and the policymakers who authorize that policy have decided to set aside, give or take about $250 million on an annual basis. That $250 million is a credit risk premium to cover essentially the cost of providing loans at the terms in which they provide, which, to say directly, are off-market in terms of the interest rates that we receive. So there's like sculpted debt service, lower coverage ratios. You can get AAA rates with, as long as you're credit worthy. So you can have, triple B rated kind of debt and get AAA rates. And so there's a subsidy for each of these loans. It varies depending on kind of the risk associated with the loan. So let's say that more details there. Toll road, riskier, right? Because it's something new that's being created that doesn't exist. So the credit risk premium that has to be used is greater for the kind of an X-size loan compared to tax-backed debt, where the tax has been in place for a number of years for the same X-size loan. But it is a subsidized borrowing program with the purpose of enhancing the number of projects you can do or the amount of capital you can put forward on a given kind of revenue stream.
And Mr. Secretary, as I think was said, the repayment of TIFIA loans is solely from the tax and other revenues that are generated for these projects.
Yes, sir. The debt service is paid with the regional
And
fuels tax
there's no
revenues.
obligation of the Commonwealth to come in and pay these loans aside from these revenues that were discussed.
And to be clear, this is based on the regional revenues in the interstate corridor improvement. It does not include the funds from the statewide taxes in the interstate operations and enhancement program. And if you're wondering why is he making this very specific point, the reason we can borrow against those revenues without it impacting the debt capacity of the Commonwealth is regional revenues cannot be used to pay statewide obligations to meet the terms of the Constitution. You have to provide a peculiar benefit for a regional tax, and if you use that for a statewide purpose, you lose the kind of peculiar benefit to that tax district. So those taxes on the 81 corridor in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, because they're regional in nature, can support debt, and that debt doesn't impact the Commonwealth's debt capacity because those revenues can't be used to pay other Commonwealth debt because of how they're imposed. So it's a weird set of structures, but it's extremely important for purposes of this program, because if we were impacting the Commonwealth's debt capacity, it is unclear to me whether we would have ever gotten the debt authorization to begin with back in 2020. I believe, Mr. Gribben, you had...
Yes, there's one question. Thank you, Ms. Pryor, for this presentation. Very, very good. Very sophisticated use of rural TIFIA. And I was just curious, as you had estimated what the savings would be from using rural versus traditional and versus municipal debt. If you don't have it off the top of your head, that's fine. But it is, the way you structure this, very clever and very much the benefit of the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Yes, I can get you that information. I do not have it in the top of my head.
Other questions from Ms. Pryor? Thank you, Ms. Pryor. So board members, we have some choices before us. I want to be very clear, we will not be moving into Dr. Schul's presentation on VTrans because that is not something that will happen in 15, 20, or even potentially 30 minutes. Nor will we be going to the commissioners' presentation, which I think you all know how long that will take. And then Ms. Ray's presentation is kind of related to what the commissioner's talking about, so we also don't want to do that. We could potentially do Mr. Hutchinson's budget recap presentation. I suspect that may go slightly past noon, and so I'm just looking for level of comfort with eating a little bit into lunch. No one appears to be that upset, so with that, Mr. Hutchinson, you are welcome to take the podium.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, Carol. Okay, members, so as the Secretary mentioned, we are just doing a brief overview. These slides are not all too dissimilar from ones that you saw at the previous CTB meeting when things were still a little bit in flux. This is an update on pretty much all the items that we discussed as the major transportation components that were in flight. And so this is the update as to their final disposition as the budget was signed into law, as of course folks have talked about already, by the end of the fiscal year, June 29th, June 30th. LIS seems to say June 29th, but I might have gotten that wrong. But as a quick update, so on June 22nd, the General Assembly passed the conference budget. On June 29th, the General Assembly adopted a number of amendments from the governor, and subsequently the governor signed the budget into effect. So I should say at the top, this presentation is just to inform CTB members. No action is needed. But the major transportation components of the budget include funding, as previously mentioned in a past presentation, funds to support the House Joint Resolution 28 Subcommittee that will study and report on the status of transit in Hampton roads. Excuse me. Funds to support the development of an inland port in Washington County. Additional support for metro capital and operating needs, as well as flexibility to preserve the ability to offer 14 toll-free trips per week for low-income drivers to cross the downtown and midtown tunnels between Norfolk and Portsmouth, as well as a directive for the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to study opportunities for transit-oriented development across the Commonwealth. So a little bit more detail on some of these. The Department of Rail and Public Transportation received a study directive in the budget to conduct a statewide review identifying opportunities for transit-oriented development, including near existing and proposed transit and rail stations.
I believe it's due at the end of this year, calendar year, is that correct, Director Zimmerman?
Yes, the General Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The General Assembly report is due December of this year. We're actually looking at sort of a phase 2. That could be some implementation things that would come in next year, but to meet the General Assembly's requirements, that is this December.
We normally have 9 months to do these studies. We have 6 months this time, so we're working and doing the best we can within the time frame that is available. Mr. Hutchinson?
Yep. And an additional directive directing the Secretary of Transportation to evaluate options to accelerate improvements to the Interstate 81 corridor. Some additional funding of $20 million to support the development of an inland port in Washington County, including to support site readiness, infrastructure, and targeted industry recruitment. Another directive for the Secretary of Transportation to examine opportunities to enter into a ticket reciprocity agreement with the District of Columbia and Maryland. As mentioned a couple slides ago, some needed flexibility for the department to ensure low-income drivers can continue to take advantage of 14 toll-free trips per week through the downtown and midtown tunnels between Norfolk and Portsmouth. As previously mentioned, $300,000 that Ms. Pryor mentioned on her slides as well for DRPT to support the subcommittee study of transit in Hampton roads. And also, as Ms. Pryor mentioned in her presentation, some one-time funding of $19 million for the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to support transit capital needs. A quick slide on the components of the budget that applied to Virginia Metro, which we also mentioned at the previous meeting. To address operating needs, the budget signed into effect the end of last month provides, as was also mentioned in Ms. Pryor's slides, $153 million in general fund to address half the increase in Virginia's share of the increase in operating needs for Metro for 27 to 28. On the capital and operating side, what was included in the budget and is now in Virginia code is that for cities and counties within Planning District 8, Northern Virginia, they are authorized a local sales tax, local sales and use tax of 1% that must be approved by a local referendum. And the revenues from that can go towards public transportation and/or school construction. And separately, those updates to code that were included in the budget also provided an affirmative requirement on the cities and counties that comprise the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission to fund their proportionate share of Metro capital costs. And then the last bullet you see on the slide there, some additional reporting requirements were placed on Metro for detailed reporting of operating and capital costs to the Commonwealth, as well as a requirement that Metro contain future cost increases to no less than 3% a year.
Mr. Hutchinson, before you leave this slide, I know in the past at board meetings, we talked about DMV moves and the capital funding needs of WMATA. If you talk to members of the Assembly, this is their response to that request. So they have essentially, again, as we talked about, that because of bonding issues needed to be paid for with not statewide funds, but with regional funds. And so they did two things related to that funding here, as Mr. Hutchinson noted. They essentially said, local governments, you need to pay your proportionate share based on how the WMATA bill currently works today. And so starting in FY29, that's $136 million divided by those 6 jurisdictions. There's a formula. It can be very, very little for small places like Falls Church, and it could be dramatically more for the largest jurisdiction, Fairfax County, right? But it says this is an affirmative requirement that is placed by the state in law on these jurisdictions to make that commitment. It also grows at 3% a year. It then, though, said, here's a tool that if you want to, you can avail yourself of to help make that payment in terms of this 1% local option tax. This does require a referendum, just as it does for all other jurisdictions. So in the rest of the state, this was also authorized, but only for school construction. In Northern Virginia, recognizing that the needs there may be school construction or may not, but certainly are public transportation purposes, it is both eligible uses. So I expect this will be an ongoing discussion in Northern Virginia in the coming months. So I'm just flagging this for members who live in those areas. This is not the last time you were going to hear about this particular topic. But I also wanted to hit a little bit on this last bullet that Mr. Hutchinson noted. There were a number of, I think, important kind of reforms that were out of here. And so, you know, WMATA used to not have a long-term capital program. They used to have capital funding agreements. Those lasted anywhere from 2 to 4 years. But what it meant was when you were in the last year of that, you didn't know what the capital funding need was going to be the next year. And so in 2018, we actually said, this has to stop. We want 6-year capital budgets and programs so we have some insight into the future. I think what the DMV moves process demonstrated to me is, while obviously we can only go so far out with programs, we need to go further out with kind of plans. And so there has to be a 20-year kind of horizon of what do they think is going to happen and how are they planning to use their dollars. And importantly, how are they tracking performance to that? So if something is starting to go off the rails, no pun intended, we have awareness of that in advance, because we didn't have, in my opinion, the level of awareness we should have had from 2018 to what then precipitated the DMV moves kind of area where we're saying, hey, we're running out of funding again and we're going to have a big problem. If that is happening, we should be aware of it, well in advance, and we should have the opportunity to take remedial steps and cure that situation with WMATA. And we haven't always had that because we haven't had that insight. And so there's a requirement, again, for this 20-year plan. The other thing that was done, and we're going to be bringing information on this back to the board as it is developed, is we are modifying the cost control metric that was in place for WMATA. And so what we put in place in 2018, which was the first cost control metric we'd ever put in place for WMATA, is saying the subsidy to any given jurisdiction, and by that I don't mean a Fairfax or a Falls Church, I mean a Virginia, DC, or Maryland, cannot grow by more than 3%. But that doesn't take into account the amount of service you're getting or other types of changes, right? And so it created some interesting dynamics is the word I'll choose to use, that's happened since we put that in place. So we're changing the cost cap to actually be on a unit of service. So WMATA can't control all things in the world, but what they can control is how much it costs to provide the thing they produce. And what they produce is bus service and rail service. And so what they're going to be asked to develop over the next, I believe it's year, is what is the methodology they will use to analyze the unit cost of bus service. And then as decision makers in the region, working with WMATA, we can know what each hour of bus service costs, and we can know in the future that that's not going to grow by more than 3%. And so we're connecting the cost control to the unit of service, whereas before it was just a control on how much you had to pay, not on what you got. And so what we're saying is if you're buying Coke and it's $1 today, you will know that if you want to buy 2 cans of Coke next year, it's going to be no more than $1.03, rather than just whatever your bill is without regard to how many Cokes you're getting is going to go up by 3%. And so that's a big change. And so they'll be working on that methodology in the next year, and then they'll have another year to kind of put in place the first benchmark before the capital funding is provided to them in '29. I know this sounds rather esoteric as I'm talking about it, but it is a pretty significant change in terms of those cost controls that we're putting in place for WMATA, and that's all kind of encapsulated in that one little bullet there, which is the whole host of changes to the code that are behind it.
Questions?
Justin.
Question.
Dr. Smoot.
We're often running on round 7 of Smart Scale. What needs to happen to know how much is going to be available both for the high priority pot and the district grant pots?
Dr. Smoot, that is a great question. I think we need to have some discussions tomorrow with the commissioner about pavement and bridge conditions, which will then lead into some additional discussions later this fall and some decisions. And I think we've talked about this past meeting, so there's no reason not just to highlight it again. We're going to have discussions about trade-offs between conditions of pavements and bridges and available resources for construction. And I think when we adjudicate those trade-offs, we will be able to give clarity on what is available for round 7 of Smart Scale. I do think I can say with some confidence, and I can't see Ms. Pryor, so there she is. Well, she can't stop me anyway, that round 7 should be larger than round 6 of Smart Scale. I feel very confident about that. I think we can tell you what the upper bound is. You know, that was somewhere north of $1 billion, but I think whether it stays there or comes down is directly related to the commissioner's presentation tomorrow and the decisions that we as a board collectively make between now and December. And so what I would say is we will have full clarity by December, and that should also give us greater clarity for round 8 so we can know it sooner. But because we have not made the decisions yet about the pavement and bridge conditions there, we don't understand whether or not we will need to transfer resources effectively from construction to sustain certain levels of condition performance. And I'm not saying that we will choose to do that or that we won't choose to do that, but I'm saying we have to make that decision. And the commissioner has a whole host of things he's going to walk through tomorrow that kind of show us those trade-offs.
Thank you.
Any other questions before Carol walks us through kind of what will happen for the remainder of the day? Seeing none, I'm going to thank you, Mr. Hutchinson, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Mathis, who will give us kind of a rundown.
Okay. Once the meeting is suspended, I have lunch set up around the corner near the Vivian's restaurant. I would say take 45 minutes, not the whole hour. Once you get on the tour bus today and we go to our tours, we will not be returning to the hotel until after the dinner.
So charge your phones.
Yes.
Just minor suggestion before lunch. Okay, so again, folks, I'm getting ready to suspend the meeting. Tomorrow will come. I'm going to start the action meeting. We will immediately suspend it. We will then complete the workshop agenda. We will reconvene the action meeting around 11, starting with public comment. And then if there's any workshop, we'll kind of complete that at that time and then go back and finish the action meeting. So again, appreciate everyone today, and I'm suspending the workshop meeting of the Transportation Board.